name is Yves Peisner, and welcome to the Trend Factory 2023. This year we have many interesting talks in two basically main categories. One category is all about sustainability and storytelling in the jewelry industry. And the second one is called The Future is Now, where we will cover anything digital, social media, and artificial intelligence is also a big part, and also retail design. So then I will come to our first speaker. Anand, please welcome to the stage. He's the CEO of Forum, a design agency from London, specializing in the luxury industry. And I think he is much better in introducing his company, so the stage is yours. Welcome, Anand.
Hi. Before I introduce myself, I just want to ask a question. Raise your hand if you have children. Now lower your hand if you have children but you're not married. Okay, so if this audience were Gen Alpha and Gen Z, half of the people who had children wouldn't be married. I think that's quite an astonishing change in norms that have governed all of our lives, and I want to touch on it a little bit later. But first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Anand, and I run a consultancy called Matter of Form. We do three things. We do brand strategy, digital experience, and innovation, and we do it for timeless brands. For us, a timeless brand is three things. It is an organization that thinks long-term. It's a business that is founded on a strong spirit, that has strong ethos, and it's an organization who see design as a point of competitive advantage. I think that's probably true of every brand at this conference. We do it for organizations in jewelry, watches, hospitality, other craft-driven businesses like Zaha Hadid, all sorts, a mixture. So today, one of the first themes that I want to talk about is value. And I want to start by talking about a documentary on Netflix that I watched the other day, and it's called Sour Grapes. Has anyone seen this documentary? No one's seen it. Maybe it's a London thing, but it is a fascinating documentary about an Indonesian man who cons hundreds of wine aficionados in California out of tens of millions of dollars. Right? He mixes fake wines, and he tells a great story, and all of these people buy his wines, and they're none the wiser. Right? And the stories he tells create this sort of sense of value, this reinforced sense of value that actually backs up this authentic pleasure. Right? These people who drink his wine, fake wines, some of these wines, hundreds of thousands, they love it. They really genuinely love this wine. But the most fascinating part of this documentary is that when he's uncovered as being a fraud, right, none of the people who bought the wine believe that he's a fraud. Right? They're so invested, and they've got such a high sunk cost bias. No, this is not fake wine, this is genuine. Right? And you know, for me, it just illustrates the power of story and the power of story in providing context to all sorts of unquantifiable forms of value that exist in the world in which we live in today. I mean, how astonishing must it have been for those in the world of art to have seen soup cans that were worth so much money, but didn't really seem to be a demonstration of the inherent craft that people were used to in art. And perhaps more recently, as astonishing as this, frankly, slightly dejected-looking ape after the NFT crash of the last year. But you know, it's ultimately something that has been backed up by people who have gravitas, and those people who have gravitas provide story that gives context, that drives status, that makes value. In a world where if you have money, you can have anything. It's stories that have increasingly become a form of social capital. I think there's like an old saying, no man or woman is poorer than that who only has money. So why am I talking about stories in the context of innovation? I'm talking about stories because I think it's incredibly important to be reminded of some of the human truths that govern what creates value in the world in which we live in. Right? The formats might change. There might be Web3, there might be NFTs, there might be immersive experiences, left, right, and center. But some of the truths about how we tell our brand story, they don't change. Right? Stories create meaning and value, and they always have done. Right? In the medieval ages, a handful of nutmeg could buy you a ship. Why could it buy you a ship? Because those who held dinner parties used it as a conduit into telling stories of exotic cultures that heightened their sense of status. And in fact, several years afterwards, you could buy an entire estate with a handful of cloves. I find this stuff so astonishing, you know, how value has shifted over the ages. And we all know that it's exactly what De Beers did in '38. Right? They controlled the supply of diamonds. Engagement rings weren't really a thing. They, through advertising, created desire in a category that didn't already exist before. And what's valuable, right, is changing, and we're really in a moment where that change is significant, more significant than it's been for the last couple of decades. So, I will touch on value again as I move through the presentation, but because this is the first presentation of the day, I just want to zoom out a little bit and talk about the industry more broadly. It's a big industry. Luxury has been recession-proof. Watches and jewelry in particular has done very well over the last few years. By 2030, this is predicted to be $520 billion. So 8.5% growth year on year from the $200 billion that it's worth today. In fact, Sotheby's reported on an online auction in March last year a 97% sell-through rate. Right. What I find really fascinating is that 20% of all bidders across 32 countries were new to Sotheby's. How people engage online, the things they're willing to invest in online, the big ticket items they're prepared to spend money on online has completely changed over the last few years, and wealth is being generated in new countries in new ways. You know, the premium demanded for some of these items has only increased. I think it was $57.5 million the De Beers Blue, I think, sold last year. But then at the other end of the spectrum, we also have this like emerging middle class, lower entry points. To go back to this advert, half of Gen Z women believe an engagement ring should cost between $100 and $999. That's a far cry from the 2 months of salary that De Beers suggested back in 1938 signified true love. The Chinese customer is back and in person and will be 50% of all luxury shopping. And big moves are happening in the industry. Right? LVMH buying organizations like Pedemonte, who combine technology and craft and back up their supply chain. Companies who didn't even exist in the category, moving into the category with genderless fine jewelry collections based on pavé traceable diamonds and recycled gold. Large players in the category moving into completely dematerial worlds, right? NFTIF, Beyond Wonder. But despite that, and that construct of value that is beginning to exist dematerially, right, there's also an intrinsic value that's increasing. I find this particularly interesting, like Amrapali, right, they saw a 300% increase in customers who came to their stores in London just to buy loose gems. Right, they didn't want the customization or the things that sat around the core gem. They came just to buy loose gems. They saw it as a good investment. And that's resulting in platforms like IceCap, right, where people are trading what they consider to be a safe commodity. So basically, in summary, like every aspect of this industry is increasing, whether it's the aspect that's in the business of perceived value or whether it's the aspect of the industry that's sort of, in the business of what you might consider to be intrinsic value. Just to drop a little bit of a bombshell about the customer, I found this quite interesting. 2 years ago, women surpassed men as the lead purchasers of flowers. Right? And it's a slightly facetious headline in prelude to what I found very interesting as is relevant to this category. Right? A decade ago, just 5% of women bought themselves jewelry. Right? Last year, 40% of jewelry was bought by women for themselves. It's quite a dramatic change in 10 years. I actually can't believe how little it was in 2012. It's not even that long ago. 5% is nothing. The same is happening for men as well. Right? When Liberty moved some of their fine jewelry collections from the women's floor to the men's floor, they saw a 72% increase in sales. That's huge. Right? And perhaps underpinning all of this is this gender-fluid movement, right? When it comes to advertising jewelry, when it comes to advertising watches. Comme des Garçons leveraged their sort of androgynous positioning to partner with Mikimoto to launch a highly successful line of jewelry based on this premise. And you can see, products like LVMH Vault, they're increasingly modeled equally. It's a really, really big step change. To my point at the beginning of this presentation, rituals that we perhaps once all took for granted, engagement, engagement, weddings, these norms that have all been a part of our, that's not very healthy, is it? These norms that have been part of, of how we're used to sort of gifting and how we're used to celebrating relationships are changing. Bear with me while I sort out the technical problem. Okay, we're back. Hopefully we're back. No, yeah, I turned it off just for a moment. Yes, back on. Okay. We're seeing brands like LA's Ceremony capitalize on that, right? It's actually a great thing. People want to celebrate different types of moments, and that's an amazing marketing opportunity, right? To redefine the types of things that various tribes might consider special, and to turn those into things that are linked to your product. And at the top end of the market, you can see companies like De Beers investing almost 100 million in Lightbox. And while they're lab-grown diamonds, and that is a core part of the reason for their investment, they also have moved away from De Beers' traditional marketing slogans centered around traditional forms of love and relationship. People are just really free today to be different people in different moments, right? The luxury customer is really flexible. And that is a huge opportunity when you are in the business of selling things that have perceived value and are linked to story, and you have the opportunity to enact a part of that story and create like a valuable exchange. Tech and symbolism, they're vying for a space on our wrist, right? We have Apple watches and Ringly and Oro devices that vie for the same space that watches and jewelry once vied for. But again, because the customer's more flexible, there are more opportunities to design beautiful moments. What they wear one day won't be the same as what they wear the next. In fact, the technology that we wear is so commoditized and looks so generic that there's a space to enhance things that have become commonplace on everyone's body. Companies like Boucheron are also using technology to explore entirely new materials, right? Materials that, again, don't have any intrinsic value. That value will only be propped up by story. I find really interesting what Raythel and Wolf are doing, which is actually open sourcing design. So when you purchase something, you purchase a metaversal artifact, but you also purchase the rights to 3D print that product in whatever materials you choose to print it in. Tomorrow's customer will also exist in new realms. Right? Gaming is going to grow to become the world's largest media category. Like, I'm not a gamer, personally. And I think if you're not a gamer, it's really hard to get your head around the fact that places of influence won't just be music, TV, film, like you're used to if you're not in the world of gaming. If you're to believe this chart, it's actually already bigger than all of the other media categories combined. Right? And it's super evenly spread amongst income, amongst age. And what's not represented on this chart is it's also very, very split evenly between gender. Male and female have similar proportions of gamers, which I also found quite astonishing because I've always associated gaming as very much a male thing, a male in a basement thing. And that digital physical augmentation is a really interesting opportunity for brands to leverage, right? Louis Vuitton's partnership with League of Legends allows you to unlock further customization for pieces of jewelry and, in fact, even access to the physical products based on player competency. Right? So your strategy for like the metaverse or for Web3 needs to consider your future customers as a player, not just as a customer. It's a mindset shift. Now, it's sort of impossible when setting a scene to open a conference to maybe not talk about NFTs. And if Paris Hilton's excited about NFTs, then surely you should be too. But we've all seen, in fact, that there's been so much success in the world of NFTs. Success, I say in inverted commas, that some of those NFTs have made their way into physical products. Right, by 2030, $300 billion will be spent on NFTs. Right, that's 10% of the whole luxury market. Mm. My advice always with NFTs in the world of Web3 is to tread carefully. It's very, very easy to capitalize on brand equity and create very high margin products that use your brand to create value. It's very easy to lose that value very quickly if your foray into that world is done without taste and is done incorrectly. I don't know, there's a marketing professor called Rory Sutherland, and he mentioned something that always stayed with me, which was, in this material world in which we live in, if we can create value from things that are completely dematerial, then surely that's the apex of environmentalism. But when considering a Web3 strategy, or when considering NFTs, we need to move from a mindset that's focused on reinterpreting, the analog products that we have around us, to really reimagining what products look like when influenced by science fiction, when influenced by gaming. Right? Bayer Chronometry did a hugely successful NFT Web3 drop. However, what do you actually own when you buy an NFT? At the moment, there are serious problems with interoperability. And so when you buy these watches, you're not buying anything that can tell the time, nor are you buying anything that can move from one space to another. So the market is yet to mature. Irrespective of that, we're seeing all sorts of platforms emerge that allow you to link physical and digital products, right? So in fashion, there are platforms like the Dematerialized. Right? In jewelry, there's things like HW3, where you can store and archive digital collectibles. I actually really like this example from the world of drinks. A company called Block Bar, right, I think really nicely demonstrates the interplay between physical product and virtual product, right? When you buy fine wines or spirits, you buy them in bond, and they're stored as NFTs in your phone, so you have bragging rights, you can talk about them, you can show them to people. It offers the brand the opportunity to open up further context and story. And when you decide to drink that fine wine or spirit, your NFT combusts, and you're sent the spirit to enjoy. The big auction houses have moved to Web3. There are so many advantages offered through things like smart contracts that can help track provenance, ownership, repairs, all sorts of advantageous aspects that can be sort of brought to the buying process and to the process long after an individual purchases something, to unlocking the story that adds meaning and value to the thing that's being bought. Elsewhere in the world of luxury, we're lightening up, right? Like, can you imagine 10 years ago Tiffany partnering with Nike? You know, or Gucci partnering with North Face? Yeah. Or Francois Bourgeois, that TikTok influencer, partnering with the Orient Express? You know, we're lightening up. We're finding unexpected ways to collaborate with those who represent niche culture, and we're doubling down on it. It's super interesting, and it's reflective of the fact the customer is flexible. But the power is also shifting to the customer. Right? These Paris sneakers that were launched last year really divided the room. Right? Are they a commentary on poverty? Are they a mockery of the social class system? Are they a mockery of those who can't afford to feed and clothe themselves? As a brand, your tonal qualities and the things that you choose to stand by have become unbelievably important. You run the risk of being cancelled if there are inconsistencies. Not if you say the wrong thing, if you don't stick to the thing that you said you were about, right? So in luxury in general, there's this like shift from product-driven innovation, right? From this very analog world that's predictable, that's quite infrequent, a world of press releases that exists in its own world, that waits to be found, that's quite mystical and standoffish on its own terms and purist, you know, to one that's about values-driven innovation, right? To one that's a democracy. Huge amounts of transparency in supply chain. You can buy anything you see anyone else has. Frequently engaging and surprising, and companies now engaging in rich, confident, bold, integrated campaigns that seek to explore new worlds and come and find their customer in niche pockets that exist across all sorts of domains. Very much on the customer's terms, you know, and brands, the expectation is that they're brave, experimental, and collaborative. So I now talk quickly about the experience, right? Every aspect of the funnel is changing when purchasing high-end products. And the story really begins with the showroom, right? Jewelry and watches famously is a category where you don't necessarily encourage customers to come and touch and feel the product, right? It's a bit like, okay, you don't do that. But unfolding that story and beginning to create associations that build the paradigm of value, start at the first touch point, and how you think about stores or trade stands or other physical components of your brand experience has changed. Right? You need to really rethink that precious time you have physically with someone in a world that's become digital. We see companies like Swarovski redesigning all of their stores, or previously the Tiffany exhibition, doubling down on that thought. Because the other end of the funnel, right, people are basically expecting to have their gems sent to them so they can preview things at home before even buying. I mean, this isn't even framed as a return. This is just a preview, you know, that Frank Darling offer prospective customers. The truth is that clienteling and a one-to-one service online has been made far more prosaic after COVID, right? EIP Privé, 3% of their customers drive 40% of all of their sales, right? Just by having like a one-to-one relationship with their customers, despite digital. Thread styling, they're doing 1 million plus transactions just on WhatsApp. COVID's really pragmatized how we engage with our customers. That's a big opportunity. Now, a couple of other things that I think are relevant to this sector that perhaps aren't as prevalent as they are in other sectors. People, even when they have the money, are moving from the desire to own things to a desire to subscribe. Right? They want flexibility. They want to be able to select different things. They want to be able to update their look. We can see it in high-end fashion, things like Rent the Runway. We can see all of the car brands switching to subscription models with Uber-esque counterpart apps. We can see it in private aviation. So I just want to summarize a couple of key thoughts. The first is that value is really driven by story, right? And story starts way before a prospective customer even comes in contact with the product. But it also continues into their relationship with the product long after they've bought it. The second point is that the market is growing, right? Both the intrinsic worth of jewelry and watches, as well as the design aspect, right? They're both independent areas for value creation. The third is really important, and it's the refining of your tonal quality. How do you speak to your customers, right? Customers are hypersensitive. They want confidence, right? But they want consistency. That consistency, there's so much noise in this world that our armor that we've all developed is picking up on inconsistency, right? The minute we pick up on inconsistency, we lose trust. That's one of the big dangers linked, in my mind, to moving too quickly into areas like Web3 and undermining the craft, provenance, and trust that should be implicit within your brand. The fourth is around gaming. It's a key part of the future. Just like music and film, it'll be a key channel in luxury more broadly, right? But gaming requires a player strategy, not a customer strategy. It's different. The fifth is things like smart contracts can really open up stories on provenance, right? They can protect resale, and they represent a really interesting commercial opportunity, especially with things like resale, but it's a separate story. And the sixth is, business models are changing, right? Shared ownership, experience showrooms, friction-free digital clienteling, try at home. These things all put pressure on business models, so you need to pick the things that are relevant to the type of organization that you are. Okay, so, questions that I think are important to ask is like, what's your brand script? How do you enact the story to the customer? Where will you create value, right? Intrinsic or design. Intrinsic is related to the sort of quality of the product or design. What are your quirks and key beliefs? How are you going to stand out from the sea of sameness? What is your challenge and action? Can Web3 be useful to actually protect your business model and open up stories that create meaning and value? And where do you add and remove friction, right? And I'll come to the point around friction in a second. But first, I just want to sort of drill down from like the macro points made at the beginning of this presentation to just a reminder of a couple of human truths that I find really interesting. Expectation theory, right? Expectations impact experience. In a test, 2 of the same chocolate cakes, one titled velvet chocolate cake, the other titled chocolate cake. 10% increase objectively in like taste profile, right? Everyone who ate the velvet chocolate cake rated it 10% better than those who just ate the chocolate cake. Right? It's like, the things that we expect to happen impact our what I would call objective appreciation, right, of the product or experience. Right? Marketing isn't just selling something to someone, it's beginning to start creating the associations that impact the experience. To my point at the beginning of this presentation about Rudy, the wine fraudster, stories impact experience, expectation theory. The second point I wanted to make relates to the other end of the funnel. Right? If you aren't confidently putting content and story between your customer and commerce, right, you run the risk of this phenomena called buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse is basically like a come down. If you buy a product and you haven't engaged with the story that sits behind it, right? People basically feel dejected. They buy something, but they haven't gone on a journey to buy it, and they won't be loyal customers or advocates for your product in the future. So conversion isn't the apex. It's not where we're trying to get to. We're trying to get beyond conversion. We're trying to create an experience that creates lifelong fans, not one-off purchases. Okay, this is a bit of a weird example, right? I've purposely chosen an example that's in a completely different sector, but I found it interesting. And it's about anchoring value, right? This is an example, like, as you can tell, from like the beginning of the internet, right? When The Economist wanted to sell subscriptions, online subscriptions and print subscriptions. They had 2 choices. One of the choices was theeconomist.com for $60. The other choice was theeconomist.com and the print subscription for $125. I mean, these guys were dismayed because like 98% of people chose the online-only subscription, despite the fact the internet looked like that at the time. They then introduced a decoy option, right? Which was just the print subscription for $125. So now you have the .com subscription for $60, and you've got the print for $125, and then you've got the online and print also for $125, right? 96% of people then chose the print and online because it was great value. Now, I've chosen this like example that's sort of diametrically opposite example from watches and jewelry, but it is as relevant, right? Everyone is looking for value. Like, it doesn't matter how much money they're spending. In fact, normally, ultra-high net worth individuals, they're the one who love like getting value the most. We all know this. So anchor, create options, frame how you sell your products in a way that gives people a point of relative reference, right? So they understand what they're spending the money on, where the premium is. Okay. A bit of a provocation. It's like, what would your brand mean if there was no product? Right? It's like, what's that like inherent value? What is your business when you remove the inherent value? And the reason I talk about this is because, for me, one of the key aspects of what the future holds for this industry is ritual and the level of invested effort that you can draw your prospective customer into, right? Because we live in a world where if you've got money, anyone can have anything, right? And it's back to that, like, the point about sunk cost bias with Rudy and his wine fraud. You know, it's true of, well, we'll do some examples in a moment. The thing is, in life, if things are too easy, right, if there's no arc, if there's no tension, right, then there is no story. Right? We are hardwired to engage with stories that follow the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey is like, you know, individual, has call to adventure, goes through various trials and failures, has a bit of a revelation, changes internally, but sort of returns physically back to the village he started from, or he or she started from. The point is, they go through a level of personal change or personal investment of their time to then buy in, you know, to the product or to the story, gives the story meaning, gives the product value. It's what's made companies like Le Labo so successful, right? You invest your effort and time into seeing these things mixed. You see the ritual of them. You know, in a completely different industry, it's what's made SoulCycle so successful, the cult of SoulCycle time. Okay, you know, and similarly, it's you know, it's what made companies like Vashi so successful, right? You're really part of the design process. So I'll be quick. Innovation is the lifeblood of the strongest luxury brands, but being timeless used to be like very easy. It was about heritage, it was about quality, it was about craft. But the customer in the category, you know, they've changed, right? We've got these young luxury customers. We've got preferences that are shaped younger. We've got competition for attention. Okay, this is funny, right? There was an experiment that was conducted, you know, with men and women, and they had their phones taken away for 15 minutes, and they were told you can have an electric shock or have your phone back, to have your phone back. And I'm embarrassed of my half of the species to say 64% of men took the electric shock to have their phone back, only 20% of women. The point is, you know, our attention spans and our ability to just sit quietly with ourselves has been hugely disrupted. You know, we've just a complete rewiring of our brains. Sorry, I know I'm a bit low on time. So we're also very reliant on technology, right? So timelessness, it requires constant innovation. We've got to think about new customers. We've got to tap into new attitudes. We've got to do the unexpected and experimental, push things forwards while harnessing the power of tech and doing it in a way that's tasteful. It doesn't undermine our brand values. I mean, it's not an easy feat as a brand. I think the problem with innovation at the moment is there are like two types of innovation. There's this like really small innovation that's incremental and it doesn't really move things forward and it's like a bit like sort of internal and back officey. And then there's big innovation, which is really scary and daunting. It's all about Web3 and trends and this PR-focused stuff. But really meaningful innovation needs to bring clear customer value, it needs to bring clear business value, and it needs to build your brand long term. You know, right now we can see so much marketing bullshit that's about Web3, and actually most of the time it's just a headline. right? It's not really something that truly moves things forward, right? So innovation needs to happen at core business model level. You just need to go back to your brand truths. If this is the brand, this is our purpose, then what is our white space? What is the role of all of these things? How do we organize these things that are happening to make sense for our customer experience and our customer story? Because ultimately, like your brand, it's the sum of every single interaction. It's not just a static thing that lives in a brand book. It's a storyboard, right? And a homogeneous experience relies on the symbiosis of brand and how you deliver your service. It is very, very, very important. You know, this is an example of some work we did for Chanel, but it's like how we think about it is like, you know, what is the customer thinking? What are the actions the customer take? You know, what are the backstage things that need to happen in your organization? Who are the people responsible for delivering the service? How can you imbue every one of those touch points with personality and spark? So questions to ask yourself, you know, are we writing the right story, right? What is the story of our brand? What is our client experience? Are we evoking the correct emotion and encouraging the desired behaviors, right? Are we fundamentally asking the right questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your great talk. We've gotten a little bit over time. However, if you could stay for 2 seconds, because if there's any questions in the audience, we're just going to do this a quick one. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions to Anna? No? All right, I guess then. Thank you very much again, Anna. Great. Okay, for our next speaker, first of all, I have an announcement to make. We do have translators here, so if you do not understand English so well, you can pick up a headset just over there at the concierge, and you can listen to the translation there in real time. Also, I'd like to announce that accompanying to all the talks we have here, we have 2 interactive exhibits in the form of interactive books, which you can find in the hall, either in the sustainability area and also here on my left. So, okay. So our next speaker will be Rachel Taylor. She's a journalist and I would say influencer and editor in the jewelry and watches industry. She will be talking about the evolution of the family jeweler and what ways we can approach for the future to evolve in the time today. Welcome, Rachel Taylor.
Thanks, Yves. Thanks. I'm going to use the space.
Anything for your computer?
No, all good. Good to go. Afternoon, everybody. Lovely to be here. And that was a really fascinating talk, so thank you so much for that. I think we got a real kind of trip into the future. And I think actually what I'm going to do with this talk is actually take you into the past a little bit and think about how that is going to influence the future. So my talk, as you can see, is called The Evolution of the Family Jeweler. As you've said, I'm a journalist. My name's Rachel Taylor. I've been exclusively covering the watch and jewelry industry for about 15 years. In my job, I get to be an observer, which is a real privilege, and I get to watch as the business evolves and shifts. And the pivots that companies will often make to kind of survive and thrive as the market shifts, that's always really of interest to me, as mostly what I do is I'm a business journalist. One of the longer-term trends that's really sort of fascinated me in my time writing about the industry is the evolution of what is one of the most traditional business models in our industry, which is that of the family jeweler. And actually, you know, many of the biggest brands in the world started out from this model. So I say family jeweler, and I kind of hope that people know what that means and whether that kind of translates from my native British English. But I suppose, what is a family jeweler? Traditionally, it would mean that it's an independent retail jewelry business that is owned and operated by a family. That could be multiple generations of that same family, but it sort of passes through these hands. And there's another element to these stores. So as well as being run by family, they're usually targeted at families as well. So customers tend to be maybe different generations of the same family who will quite religiously come back to the same jeweler, perhaps in a local town. So really, it's a traditional business model that is a jeweler run by a family for families. So some businesses, kind of those serving away mostly from capital cities, they have managed to hold on to this business model. So this is an example of such a business. This is from my hometown in Aberdeen in Scotland. This is a third-generation jeweler in the town. It's where my parents like to shop. It's where their parents like to shop. And it's much got a loyal clientele. I'm sure you can all think of examples from your own hometowns of similar jewelers, or maybe in the markets where you operate, of these kind of stores that exist. And in the top-tier luxury space, family-owned jewelry businesses are rarer, as many of the bigger brands, as you know, have been bought over by conglomerates, so that tends to kind of fade away. Some do remain independent, so I've given Chopard as an example here, still run by the Chauffel family, but what I will say, it's important to point out that they are not the Chopards. The brand was founded by a different family, so it was the watchmaker Louis Elisée Chopard who laid the foundations of the company in 1860. It was later bought in 1963 by the Chauffel family, who remain its guardians today. I did an interview with the current CEO, Carl Friedrich Chauffel, for the Financial Times. Thank you. And he spoke about how he really values the business's independence and how family ownership of a business can really give it an edge. So even when family businesses are no longer owned by the families that founded them, that kind of lore and that storytelling around family ownership remains strong. So if we take Cartier as an example of this, it was founded in Paris in 1847 by Louis-François Cartier, and he actually got his start by buying the business of the master he'd been apprenticed to, Adolphe Picard. Unlike the Chauffels, he did rebrand, so he changed the name of the company from Picard to Cartier. And that kind of family business, that's when that story sort of took over and that started to grow. So Alfred Cartier, who you can see, he's the one in the dashing cap here. He followed his father into the family business. Then there was three very ambitious sons, Louis, Pierre, and Jacques. So they famously joined the family. And what they really did is kind of take Cartier to the next level, make it that real global brand. You can see I've referenced, there's a wonderful book by Francesca Cartier-Brickwell about this kind of story of a family jeweler, which I would definitely recommend reading if you're kind of into this sort of story. So in 1964, Cartier was sold out of family hands. So it's now owned by Richemont, a luxury conglomerate with no familial ties to the Cartiers. Yet, as you'll find on Cartier's website today, the story of the family that founded it is the one that they return to again and again, despite that shift of ownership. Why? I think because attaching a family to a jeweler not only makes for great storytelling, that sort of rags to riches stories that we all love in this space, but what it also does is it fosters trust, which is something that really is the basis of what we would call a family jeweler. People like to buy from people. So I think this is why if you did go to look at the Cartier website, you're not going to find a corporate statement or a mission of intent, but instead it's going to be that beautifully crafted, illustrated story of a family, even though that family has not been associated with the sales of jewels under its names for nearly 60 years. So you're going to find examples of this throughout the industry. We've got Carring-owned Boucheron, which still leans very much into the story of Frederic Boucheron, who is this kind of visionary who opened the first jewelry store on Place Vendôme in Paris in 1893. That's him sitting on the chair, actually looking incredibly similar to Charles Louis Tiffany, who we have next to his blue boxes. And when it comes to Tiffany, I think it's safe to say, there's been the recent 15 billion acquisition by LVMH. I don't think that change, while it will bring lots of different changes, I don't think it's going to stop the brand from relying on the storytelling about that plucky young Charles Louis Tiffany and his quest to become New York's king of diamonds. I don't think that will change any more than the $104 million sale to Avon did in 1978. That didn't stop it, and I don't think this will either. Because family stories, whether that's current truths or whether it's archaic tales kind of amped up for marketing purposes, family stories equal jewelry. I mean, after all, we all kind of turn to jewelry to mark many of our own family milestones, whether that's engagements, weddings, births, birthdays, anniversaries, even deaths. It's intrinsically linked. So when I first started out writing about jewelry about 15 years ago, the family jeweler was really in flux. It was a time when we started to see the influence of fashion in jewelry. And of course, fashion has always had an influence on jewelry. Of course, you can't think of the 80s without thinking of kind of big, bold, outsized gold, colorful jewelry. Or indeed kind of capture the 1880s with its small, delicate diamonds that were cut specifically to sparkle well in candlelight. However, the role that fashion would play in kind of the late noughties and early 2010s, it would transform the family jeweler. This wasn't about setting trends that goldsmiths could then follow. This was really about the influx of fashion brands within the jewelry space, which is something that there wasn't before. I'm sure many of us here who have been in the industry for long enough will really sort of remember the explosion of popularity of branded silver jewelry around that time. So we kind of had Pandora, we had Thomas Sabo, Swarovski, Troll Beads. These were kind of some of the big names, but there were loads and loads. And if you go through to the fashion halls here, there's still lots of these brands around and lots of new brands. But at the time, this was something really exciting and really new. So the trend back then really was driven by silver charms. And there was lots and lots of heavy advertisements by these bigger brands and a lot of investment in making this category successful. At the time, there was also a relatively low silver price, which made it quite accessible, although we did see a really big spike in that by 2011. What this did was it was driving consumers, and crucially younger consumers, into those traditional family jewelry stores in search of these hot brands, because that's where they were being stocked at the time. It wasn't necessarily in their own boutiques. At the emergence of this category, these brands were inside these traditional family jewelers, who a lot of them might not have even sold silver before because they saw it as, perhaps an inferior product. So it was really revolutionary for these jewelers. And often previously, they might have relied on bigger, more sentimental purchases. But with charms, there was a real hook to it, because people who were buying charms, they weren't just buying once. They were collecting, and they were doing so rapidly. It was also cross-generational, so you had mothers, daughters, granddaughters, all buying into this trend, but in their own way, as the self-customization of these charms allow. And it became really big business. At the peak of the hype, many retailers reported to me that as much as 75 or 80% of their turnover was reliant on these brands, sometimes even just a single brand. And this was huge. It's essentially a brand new product category for these stores. So it was really a massive, rapid expansion. And so the family jewelers saw this happening. They saw their competitors, they saw their neighbors around them doing this, and they all got involved. And they really invested heavily in this to capitalize on it. And at the time, it was really seen as this kind of much-needed revitalization and modernization of the jewelry sector, which at the time was really considered to be quite sleepy and certainly out of touch with younger shoppers in comparison to fashion. Some might say that's still so, but I think that's a different debate. But then there was a power shift at this time. So to build these businesses, these silver brands had tapped into this existing network of independent jewelers. These stores already had strong customer bases, great relationships, and by focusing on wholesale networks, they could quickly spread across territories. However, as the phenomena continued to gather speed, these brands realized that jewelers, they were hooked, This was a big part of their business. And that meant the power started to shift. It wasn't the brands chasing the retailers anymore. It was kind of the brands started to set the agenda. And with this came tougher terms for retailers. jewelers were often told to commit to certain spending levels, perhaps predetermined selections of products. This also included, at the time, I mean, it's a much more developed category now, but when charms were really big, you know, these brands were trying to diversify into other product categories that perhaps weren't quite as successful. This had a negative effect on jewelers because when they had to take this stock they didn't necessarily want in order to keep the charms that were hugely lucrative, it meant they were left with safes just kind of filling up with product that they couldn't sell, couldn't melt, couldn't discount. It was kind of, it pushed some of them into a really difficult financial position. But I will say lots of jewelers thrived at this time. They really did. Despite the kind of increasing demands, they really did well. But it came at a price, which was the loss of their own identity. And it was really evident in the store designs of these times. So I've put a couple of examples up here that you can see of some retailers in the UK. One of the shifts at the time was pressure from the brands who wanted these shop-in-shop experiences. So rather than jewelry being sold next to other brands or unbranded jewelry, they wanted their customers, their fans, to have this real experience. So with this came the shop-in-shop. So they were kind of like tiny little versions of branded stores, but within a store. But I think the problem you can see is that when jewelers had more than one brand to satisfy, you know, they ended up looking almost more kind of like an airport terminal store than that traditional family jeweler. Especially for those with smaller stores, you know, it felt quite cluttered quite quickly. To get around this, some of them adopted a strategy where they might open a second store. That second store was purely just for these fashion brands. The original store would stay for the more traditional purchases. And some ended up building quite large networks of solo brand stores. So they might own 6 Pandora stores. To the consumer, that looks as though Pandora's running it, but in reality, it was these independent jewelers who were running them almost kind of as a separate business, but staffing and running them as their own. It's really hard for me to kind of emphasize the intensity of this time in the market. There was so much excitement around this new style of jewelry retail, so much consumer mania and hype as well. You know, the collectors were crazy. eBay was kind of full of hard-to-get charms. It was really exciting time. And there was also a lot of money being made off the back of it. And many businesses, as I've said, pivoted really fast to chase this money. And the rivalry between the brands was also incredibly intense. So for me, it was a really thrilling time to be reporting on the sector, but it was also quite high stakes for many as they went through rapid expansion plans. And as many forewarned at the time, you know, some of these retailers were sort of putting all their eggs into 1 or 2 branded baskets, as we would say. And many could kind of see that there would be trouble on the horizon. So naturally, as the power of these brands continued to grow, they sought to consolidate their positions. So no longer did they see high numbers of partnerships with these family jewelers. Instead, their focus was on direct retail that would increase their margins. The brand recognition had grown to the point consumers would seek them out. And also the timing of that chimed really nicely with the development of online shopping. People were confident to buy jewelry online now. So you might be wondering why this happened in a relatively swift time with jewelry brands, because family jewelers, you know, have been dealing with watch brands for a long time. And while there have been some echoes of this sort of pattern in that part of the industry, it's definitely less so. It was more of a symbiotic relationship and less of a dramatic arc. In my opinion, I think this was really to do with price and scale. So these brands are selling huge amounts of relatively low-priced product. I think the conversation and trust required when buying a silver charm is not the same as the reassurance needed when buying a luxury watch. And really, I think it's that reassurance and trust that people do go to family jewelers for. So these family jewelers that had thrown their lot in with silver brands, and in this craze, they were now being left out in the cold. So the question really was, what's next? As you've seen, many had given up their identity to chase profits offered by fashion brands, and now those brands no longer needed them. So the question is, how do they rebuild? For many, it was a case of getting back to basics, focusing on what had made them successful before this seismic shift in the market. As a result, what we saw was a backlash against the brands that, in many people's opinion, had rebooted and save jewellery retail at a time when it was stagnating. Now the jewellers sought to become the brands, not stock the brands. A key element of this transformation was in the product that they sold. So when they're trying to shift away from this idea of other brands and become the brand once more, it was handmade product that became really important. So jewelers with workbenches in-house, they started to see this more as just a convenience. Instead, it was a marketing tool. So this led to a trend that we still see in stores today of open workbenches. So jewelers knocked down walls that previously hid these kind of untidy, grubby benches where the jewelry was made, or perhaps they would replace them with glass. And this allowed shoppers to see these goldsmiths at work and to get a better understanding of the craft. There was much more emphasis put into the concept of handmade, local jewelry, and the messaging became, you can buy these mass-produced jewels by these big, desirable brands, or you can pay just a little bit more and forgo the branding, but you can know that your piece of jewelry has been made by hand to last forever by someone you can see working on the bench in our store. I really believe that this kind of demystifying of how jewellery is made is what's increased the bespoke jewellery market, certainly in the UK. A greater understanding of what goes into making a piece of jewellery, and whether consumers get this by watching TikTok videos or whether it's by actually seeing a jeweller at work, it's given them the confidence to embark on this commissioning process. So, if you're a jeweller that doesn't have a bench, what do? You know, this is very much the trend. People are looking for perhaps smaller designers. They're looking for handmade. They're looking for that knowledge. But there's a workaround for this. So emphasis, of course, can be put into the branding of a store, boxes, websites, in-store experiences. The store very much is the brand, not the jewel. You know, after all, I think a diamond solitaire ring, which is something that every jewelry store will sell, it's essentially a very generic product. But once you place it inside a beautifully branded box, inside a branded bag, and it's handed over to you by a sales assistant wearing a uniform branded to the store as well, it suddenly doesn't feel that generic, even though that product, you know, has probably been made overseas and it's been made in volume. And there's also the semi-bespoke method. So jewelers without their own manufacturing capabilities can work with large manufacturers who might offer unmounted rings, which allow stores to set customers' gemstones within them. They can also offer a range of design tweaks. There's great programs now that you can get on an iPad where you can adjust slight things so it feels like that real bespoke experience. But in reality, that product is being made off-site by someone else, but the idea is that they should be able to trust you for that consultation. It's kind of delightful sort of smoke and mirrors, really, in a positive way. So as we, I think, all know, experience is really everything in retail today. You know, we don't need to go into a store, so what do we get from it? We want to experience something. And it's hard, I think, the majority of retail jewelry, as we said, you know, it's not, unless it's a real kind of designer maker piece, a lot of jewelry isn't unique. You know, it's a tennis bracelet, it's a locket, it's a signet ring, it's a pair of stud earrings. You know, these items can be found with various twists in most stores. So what can't be replicated, or what shouldn't be able to be replicated, is the experience of your store. That is something that really can be unique. So we're seeing jewelers now, rather than trying to offer that kind of quite stark luxury experience that they thought perhaps they needed to before when dealing with a high-value product, we've seen a real loosening up with jewelers now leaning into their personalities, finding what makes them unique and celebrating that. I mean, this could just be something like really, really excellent customer service. If that is your USP, that could be it. Or it could be something quirkier, maybe like a branded champagne bar. It could be your own scent that might be in a candle that you could give away to customers. As you can see, I've put some images of Jessica McCormack, who's the jewelry designer, her townhouse in London. It's a place that's packed with art and curios, and it makes a trip to her store. It feels like more like going to a gallery than it does going to a store. And I think this is really what I mean as an example of a really unique experience that someone else couldn't give. So another question facing jewelers today is, how do you thrive as a family business when families are changing? So as I mentioned at the start of this talk, the long-held definition of a family jeweler is not that just it is run by a family, but that the patrons are also families. But the question is, do families still hold the same influence as they once did when it comes to purchasing decisions? If we look back in time and perhaps imagine a small town, say 100 years ago, you know, the decision of where to purchase your wedding ring was most likely to be influenced by your location and by the advice of your family. Today's consumers, however, are just as likely to seek out the opinions of friends who might have different backgrounds and therefore different recommendations. Young people are also now more likely to move away from their hometowns to study, to work, to start their own families, perhaps even abroad. In these instances, it's very unlikely that they would return to their family jeweler in their town. Instead, they're going to go out and they're going to find their own choice and start their own traditions. And obviously, we have to consider digital influences as well. You know, whereas once you might have asked your mother for advice on where to have a pendant repaired, now you can simply type it into Google for a quick local recommendation. Social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, they're full of content creators who are all vying for your attention, with algorithms finely tuned to show you posts that you like based on your activity. So often shoppers are now seeking out businesses that align with their own values as well. And that might not necessarily be the same as previous generations. So as we all know, there's more of an emphasis on ethics. Or it could just be that their favorite influencer has a brand they particularly like, and that makes them go in that direction. So we're flooded with signposting all day. You know, if we're scrolling through social media, we're chatting to friends, we're walking down the street, opening our inboxes. It feels unlikely that today's consumers would be able to block all of that out and just go to family for a recommendation. Therefore, it's not enough now for family jewelers just to rely on that generational trade. Even if people stay in the same town, the way they think and the way they want to shop might be changing. And it's also not enough really to rely on local trade either. It's not just enough to be the one jeweler in that town, because your local customers can easily buy online. They can buy from a jeweler at the other side of the world quite easily. So you shouldn't take that for granted as well. So with all this change afoot and everything that's happening, the question is there still a place for that family jeweler model? I think so. It'd be interesting to find out later what your opinions on it are. But that fundamental of building those close, trusted relationships that have the potential to last a lifetime, they remain the same, whether you're a fourth-generation family jeweler or a first. Whether you're selling to multiple generations of the same families or you're selling to friendship groups that consider themselves chosen family. I'm going to take you back to that interview that I did with Carl Friedrich Schoffel of Chopard for the FT. As I mentioned, because it contained a quote that he gave me, and I think it's really fitting here about family businesses. He says to me, there's a lot of consolidation in our sector, but I believe that strong, smaller family businesses can thrive in this environment and can offer a more personal approach with more costly or made-to-measure items. This niche or family aspect becomes more important. Because the client today is looking for a bespoke experience or something they can strongly identify with. There may be limitations in the conglomerate approach in that respect. And I think that's really interesting because technically Chopard is a big business, you know, but he still very much sees that there is that kind of real strength in family businesses and offering that service. So I don't think we should, you know, it's not time to get rid of this model at all. So if we think about what makes family jewelers successful historically, I think these are the same things that will make them successful in the future as well. And there's 4 key elements for me, and that's community, trust, service, and personality. So the community could be local physical community, or it could be a tribe that consumers want to be part of. Either way, today's family jeweler must be at the center of that community. So you need to understand who you are selling to, what they are interested in, what motivates them. And I think we've got some really good insight into that in our previous talk. So be visible where they are, and whether that's at a local school event, that's a rally, it's an art fair, you should be where they want to be. And that goes for the online world as much as the physical world. Trust. So this is more important than ever, I would argue. Thanks to the internet, consumers have ever greater understanding of supply chains, pricing, craftsmanship, ethics. Yet they still want to collaborate. And I use that word collaborate very purposefully, as this is what modern shopping is. No longer are we buying and selling, we are collaborating with customers, we are exchanging ideas. They want to collaborate with an expert they can trust to help them find a product that matches their style, needs, budget, and values. If they find a store that offers them all of those, they're likely to be loyal. Service. Great service is something you rarely get online. It's not impossible, but it's rare. And it's one way that family jewelers can trash Amazon every single time. Personalized service is what's really key here, knowing and understanding your customers in a way that search engine never can. I would also widen this to retail experience, as you're more likely to encourage shoppers to be loyal if they have a good time when purchasing with you. So as I said, we can loosen up now in retail. We don't have to be that kind of stuffy, luxury, traditional jeweler. Create memorable experiences with your clients, have fun with them, enjoy them, let them have fun with you. I think that's really important. And finally, personality. So the beauty of the family jeweler is that it is unique, which is not a word that I like to use very often, but it is unique. It's a one-off. It doesn't need to conform, as we said, it doesn't need to strip away its personality so that it can sell in volume or in multiple markets. Family jewelers today, more than ever, should lean in to what makes them special, what makes them different, the quirks that make their customers love shopping there. So the family jeweler has been on quite the ride over the past couple of decades, and even what we might consider a family jeweler to be has changed in that time. But as I said, the fundamentals really remain the same. And in jewelry, this personalized approach to selling precious goods to valued customers at pivotal moments in their lives, that will always ring true. So thank you all for coming on with me on this kind of historical journey, but also sort of a look into where we are now and where we might go in the future. And I want to leave you just with one final line to mull over as you kind of go back to wandering around the fair. And that is, my thought is that today's family jewelers should be descendants of those traditional family jewelers, not replicas. We should build on what our ancestors in business, or indeed our actual ancestors, if you are a fourth, fifth generation yourself, what they have done. But we shouldn't be afraid to shape it for today's consumer. The family jeweler as a business model, it's been evolving for hundreds of years slowly, and I believe that it will continue to thrive as long as it keeps doing so. The important thing is just to look around, look at your customer, and know what they need from you, and be unafraid to change. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. It was a really great talk. Apologies that I introduced it as an influencer. I thought an influential.
I don't mind. I'm not precious.
Sorry about that. So is there any questions in the audience? Anyone? Don't be shy. Doesn't bite. Or you had a question for the audience. You were asking for an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be really fascinated to kind of understand what people think. Because I think this kind of model of a family jeweler has legs and it can move forward as long as it evolves. But maybe some people don't think that. Maybe they think monobrand, online. Maybe that's the future. Oh yeah, I think we've got an opinion.
Hello. I'm Muriel. Nice to meet you. I'm from Paris. Thank you, Rachel. It was very interesting.
Thanks.
I just want to ask you, what do you think about the revival, heritage family, of some French brand like Vever, I'm sure you heard about,
Yeah.
or Rouvenat, because I'm working with them for some events in Paris, and it seems very interesting. And like also Copain, I don't know if you know this brand. It's existing since 1800th century. So it's in France actually we had this revival or the child that they take, or other people from not family specifically, that decided to renew the style and to rebirth the brands. And also they work as an ethical process. Example, Vever, they work with lab-grown diamonds. I would like to have your opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is something that's been fascinating me as well. I've really noticed it because there seem to be quite a few French brands, that may have lain dormant, or they may just need that kind of next kick up. Actually, I had a really good conversation with the new chief exec of Dinvan.
Yes.
So even though
yes, exactly.
unfortunately, you know, Din Van has died, but that brand is really still going, and they're starting to expand into the US. They're starting to look at other markets, but it's amazing, all these heritage brands, you know, and they're all really leaning into the story of heritage, but at the same time, like, as you say, with Weber, who is using lab-grown diamonds,
exactly.
that's something they never would have done.
Exactly.
So it's an evolution, and but it's moving forward. But we still want those family stories, and they're still very much at the core, even though these brands are starting out fresh, they're looking at new ideas, they're still holding on to that family story.
Exactly, and also they are taking care, as you say, at their community of a millennium. So it means they also adapt themselves to the evolution of the market. And I think it's exactly what you said is very interesting. It's not only special family, but it's a community as begin family also.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for French heritage brands.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
It really is.
Thank you very much.
You. Thanks.
Any more questions? Gentleman back here, 1 second.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting because you're asking for opinions. So my opinion is that you kind of nailed it with what happened to a lot of family jewelers in the last 10, 15 years with stocking brands like Pandora, Ticento, Thomas Sabo, you name it, right? So they all like were making 67, 80% of their revenue with those things, and all of a sudden what did Pandora do? Open up their own stores.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you had to reinvent yourself, and a lot of these family companies got burned because they really relied on the brands always making them your showroom and everything like that. So and thankfully, I mean, we got out just in time.
Oh, so did you go down that path as well?
We went as a family business. We went down that path too, but we thankfully pulled out just right before the whole thing was happening with them opening up their own stores and everything like that.
I think the smart ones did.
So so we went on that path with doing personalized service, bespoke items, customizations, family business kind of like thing. So we were, my wife and I, we were looking at this presentation like, yeah, that happened to us, that happened to us, and that happened to us too. But we got out before that one. So thank you for that.
Oh no, thank you.
All right, do we have any more comments? 1 second.
I'm Geneviève, I'm also French. I have a question. What could be the place of the independent creators in jewelry?
Yeah, that's another fascinating story as well. I mean, I could probably do a very similar presentation on that history as well, because I think there was a time when sort of independent stores really wanted to take on independent makers, and they would showcase it almost like galleries, and then that changed, and I think that's become less. But at the same time, I almost feel like there was a quiet revolution among these makers that I think stores didn't notice, because when they kind of were struggling to go that wholesale model, they kind of sort of quietly gave up, and they were really the first ones to grip onto social media selling and selling online. And I thought it's really interesting that maybe more traditional stores who were still grasping with how to do that, or not even thinking about it, hadn't noticed that these independent makers were really making their own retail channels. And they've actually done, some incredibly successfully done so. And I think perhaps when I talked earlier about the idea of building communities and really finding your kind of tribe, I think that's where independent makers, they excel at that, because they might have a particular style, they might have a particular set of values that the kind of followers around them, the customers around them will really appreciate. And I think there's still a great opportunity for a relationship between independent makers and stores when that's right. But I almost feel like these independent makers quietly did away with the need for that kind of secondary retail market. They're just going direct. And I think that's been really beautiful to watch, because it's great to see so many brands being able to kind of emerge and stand on their own. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. Is there any more comments, questions? No? All right, thank you so much, Rachel.
Please,
Thank you.
cheers.
Sessel und ja. Okay. Okay, hello? Hello? Yeah. I want to briefly introduce our two next panelists who will be having a chat. We have Tirat Kamdar, who is General Manager of Luxury at eBay, who flew in from California for this conversation. He joined eBay in 2020, following the co-founding of TrueFacet.com. And having this conversation with him is Jennifer Pusenkopf, who's a German jewelry and fashion designer, and who's also president of GIA Alumni Chapter Germany. So Tirat and Jennifer, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
I guess my name is right.
Dankeschön.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So, hello everybody. I hope everybody had a great first couple of hours at the INHORGENTA show. And we would like to welcome you to our fireside chat this afternoon. This panel is about luxury resale and sustainable strategy. And you join us for an insightful conversation on navigating the resale luxury market, and with it, how consumer shifts towards circular and sustainable shopping are influencing the new normal. My name, as Laurent already introduced, is Jennifer Pusenkopf. I was born and raised in Germany. I have traveled the world for many different stations. I'm a jewelry and fashion designer. I have specialized and research on consumer behavior in luxury goods. So with that background, I'm particularly excited today to gain some new insights on the global consumer trends around sustainability and re-commerce from a different expert perspective today. So yeah, also having lived in California, would like to welcome a wonderful guest who flew in all the way from San Jose, Tirat Kamdar, who is the Global General Manager of Luxury for eBay.
Absolutely. No, and look, thanks for having us here. For eBay, the German market and the European market is a very important market. We have a strong presence here, and we want to create a strong resale business in luxury where we can help the retailers, the family businesses that's similar to what Rachel just spoke about in the previous presentation, find a way to build their brand and allow us to reach that next generation of consumer across Europe and UK. And this is something where we've progressed really strongly on in the US, starting a journey 3 years ago, where we started creating authenticity guarantee programs with collaborations and partnerships with organizations like the Gemological Institute of America, which is GIA. And we're proud to be the first ones, and currently the only ones, where finished jewelry gets sent to GIA in the US market and gets authenticated and then goes onward to the buyer. GIA has been known to do this for only loose stones, but first time now they're doing this with finished goods and only with eBay. And really excited on how we can bring this globally eventually. So there's a lot to tell you about, and especially on the re-commerce movement. But yeah, I've been at eBay about 3 years and think we made a lot of changes, and excited for the potential in this market.
Yeah, it's very exciting developments that are currently taking place with the authentication. And Tirat, the whole world is speaking about sustainability and the circular economy. So could you give us your definition of re-commerce and how that relates to sustainability?
Absolutely. I'm sure in the news or you see these internet companies in re-commerce raising hundreds of millions of euros or dollars of venture funding, and you're like, what is going on here, right? And the re-commerce trend is really hot right now. And what is re-commerce? Let's define that, and I'll go into like what's really driving it. So re-commerce, first of all, is a sale of merchandise that is not new, that it's not manufactured brand new and then put for sale. It's a sale of merchandise that is pre-owned or has elements of sustainable materials in it. And that is the key component of re-commerce, right? The resale as a service. And the reason it's really important is also it really has environmental impacts involved, right? we want to avoid more waste that gets created. We want to avoid filling up our landfills further. We want to avoid carbon emissions that are going into the environment. All these things are driving factors. Other big driving factor is the Gen Z consumer. That Gen Z consumer actually prefers pre-owned versus new. We found in a study with Vogue that we conducted that in the last year, 80% of Gen Z consumers bought pre-owned versus new. And outside of Gen Z, 70% bought pre-owned versus new. So re-commerce does have strong trends, strong drivers. And where we are today, yes, the re-commerce market is big, but this is just the starting point of how big it can be. We expect by 2030 that the re-commerce market globally will be about 100 billion US dollars will flow through this market in the luxury industry. And that is large. So you have to start thinking about like how do brands, retailers, and consumers who own merchandise start positioning themselves in this new world of resale, and what are the elements of trust that have to be involved to ensure an item has quality when it gets resold, that an item is authentic when it gets resold. So really excited. What we love at eBay is helping businesses, brands, retailers take on the re-commerce movement. At the foundation, re-commerce is one of our key elements. Of course, we are a site for pre-owned merchandise and resale. That is the way that eBay got founded 27 years ago. And with our focus on luxury and re-commerce in luxury right now, and the way we're starting to work with brands and retailers to help them take that market on and reach that next generation of consumers, I think that is what I'm most excited about at eBay right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I thought it was especially interesting your insight on the influence of Gen Z and the importance of re-commerce, and also your assessment on how important re-commerce also becomes for the luxury goods industry, and also especially for the jewelry sector and the gemstone industry.
Yes.
So you also talked about re-commerce being essentially the core of eBay. But can you also tell us a little bit about what eBay is talking about sustainability, what eBay is doing for the planet, and how you're implementing greater re-commerce and sustainability measures in your organization?
Absolutely. Look, we have strict objectives and global objectives on driving sustainability, but also ensuring that we're proving that with key metrics, right? So for example, in 2022, we saved about 1.6 million metric tons of carbon emissions into the market. We want to, by 2025, get to 7 million metric tons, and we are on the path to do that, right? And we also believe that wastage, saving wastage, is a huge important element. And so as we keep focusing on the luxury re-commerce movement in jewelry, in watches, in categories like handbags and accessories, and even in sneakers, for example, we want to drive less wastage and less energy usage that puts out more carbon emissions into the market. And luxury is a key driver of getting us to some of those key metrics that I just mentioned by 2025. And so a couple things that we're doing right now that we've launched over the last 2 years that is driving greater sales and transactions of pre-owned merchandise versus new. One, we launched Authenticity Guarantee. Look, 3 years ago, eBay was not a marketplace where a watch can be purchased and it was checked by an expert. It was going directly to the buyer. We launched it in the US first, but now it's available. Now it's in Germany as well as in the United Kingdom, where watches actually go through a watch expert, a third-party company that we partnered up with, that actually checks the watches, ensures it's real, ensures it's quality, and gets it to the end buyer. Why is that important? When you have authenticity and trust, it becomes a strong driver of increased volume for all the businesses that are selling pre-owned re-commerce merchandise on eBay. So that's a huge component, right? And we're excited that we have launched this, and it is live in Germany. It is providing a lot of value for both buyers and sellers. We have the same service in the handbags business right now in the German market. And so you can buy a handbag, and it's been checked by experts who have potentially worked at some of the brands. And so we're excited that the trust component is a key driver. The other two, and I like calling this 3 T's. We had the first T, which was trust. Second one is traceability. The third one is transparency. Traceability is so key. I know the next speaker is not potentially going to speak here, but Leanne is a friend of mine. She's built an amazing technology, to give you an example, on tracing almost 6 million diamonds. Right. If you think about it, eBay, we have processed 5 million products right now through our authenticity guarantee program globally. We know where that product came from. We know who bought it. And imagine a world in the future where you can see the story of how that product exchanged hands, when you can see the amount of carbon emissions that's gone out as it's moved through the market. Traceability is a key component that the Gen Z consumer very much cares about. And next is transparency. How do you create the world of storytelling to the next generation of consumers? A big innovation that we've made a major bet on that you'll see a lot more of is live shopping and live commerce. Video commerce is taking off. And we now have created live shopping, live commerce, where we're driving an average of 16,000 viewers over 45 minutes to learn about your brand. Learn about who your brand is. It's not about selling, it's about your brand, your story, if you're a family business, the history of your family business, and allowing you to drive that increased sale and bring more transparency to the end consumer. So.
Yeah, also, it's very interesting what you talk about the trust, the traceability, and the transparency. And with the previous talk that Rachel was presenting, she was talking about trust and community.
Yes.
So talking about the family businesses and what they need and what is at their core, that is something that very well relates to a very global big company, and eBay, and what the way that the route that you are going. Going back to the sustainability, Victor, how does eBay enable sustainability for sellers and buyers, brands and retailers, like speaking more broadly?
So like, first of all, we enabled it. We just spoke about authenticity guarantee, which gives the sellers protections, right? We love to talk a little bit about protections. What if you're selling a $5,000 watch or $20,000 diamond ring, and it's being sold online to someone? Can you trust that if they return it, you're going to get that exact piece back and that it wasn't worn and it's of quality? That's a risk. I would be afraid of selling my own items if I didn't have the right protection. Same thing on payments. You want to make sure the payment is secure, that you're going to get paid and it's safe. Our program completely does that. When that product goes through our authenticity guarantee facility and it passes our checks, you are now protected. When the buyer returns, they don't return it to you, it comes through us first. If it is not the same item and of not the same condition, we send it back to the buyer, your money's protected. So we will always ensure you're protected around that, protected against payment fraud and everything. So that's a really key component. Lastly, we have strong category managers and dedicated teams for one of the first times ever over the last 3 years that have been created for the jewelry category, for the handbags category, for accessories as well as watches. We didn't really have that historically. And so as a result, now you have real people that are caring about making sure you are successful on eBay, and that is enabling stronger growth into the world of e-commerce.
And it also enables a trust in the community.
Trust in the community.
Yes, yeah.
And eBay has always been, the community has always been one of the key components across eBay. You have a community of buyers and sellers, businesses and consumers, brands and retailers, and all these become communities enthusiasts around interest, right? Be able to use live shopping and have people will comment. We'll see hundreds of comments, all these likes, hearts going up. So it's the next world of like social media shopping, right? And that's a community element if you really think about it, because people are conversating around their interest and love of jewelry, and jewelry is design as an example, right? So we're really excited. There's still a lot more we have to do, of course, in the community, but we're really excited where we are. But the reasons we're doing this is not just, okay, it's just for eBay, more for like, for education for the audience here. This is the world we are now starting to live in. When you look at how shopping, how people will get educated on what to buy before they even come to your store or they come to your brand, they would have gone on their mobile devices. And so how do you really leverage that mobile device to build an amazing storytelling-driven brand, get involved in the conversations within those communities? It really is going to start on how do you start showing up on mobile. And so these are the things that we're doing are primarily to focus on, hey, what 4 or 5 years from now could look like, because I think right now with the role of technology, we can talk about artificial intelligence even all night long. All these things are starting to converge. So it's a very, very interesting and exciting time in the world. And also for many, and I speak to a lot of retailers and sellers, a scary time because there's a lot of uncertainty on what might happen and not happen. And this is the reason we've set up the eBay business the way we have. We want to be there to help the different businesses be successful during these times.
Yeah, talking about this uncertainty and about the how eBay facilitates business for consumers and for retailers. Could you talk a little bit more about best practices for luxury brands and retailers? Is there something else that you could share with us?
Yeah, so look, it's really interesting with the luxury brands. A lot of brands are in all these different rooms, right? And we do spend time and we have conversations with different brands. We have different exciting things that will come soon in the year ahead with brands. But one of the things when you're a brand, once you sell that piece, whether it's through a store or whether it's direct to a consumer, that piece now is out there in the world. That consumer is out there, and is the brand actually able to build loyalty with that consumer when they're looking to resell that piece? How can they get involved in their resale market? So right now, what we've seen is the brands do not really understand the resale markets because they're not actively involved. They don't understand the consumer around it, the data around it, and how to build loyalty to keep that consumer in the brand family. Right, and this is the same thing plays true with retail stores. When your retailer store, your customers out there, they might be reselling those pieces you bought. How do you stay actively involved? What if when they resell it, how could they use that money right back to your store, right back to your brand? You are finding a lot of different innovations happening in here. And for us, brands do work currently with eBay. We have brands on the platform as of today. Why? Because they want to be involved and know more about how to really cater to that consumer that's looking to just resell, buy, and sell. And they want to make sure their brand is still top of that consumer's mind when they go out to resell their piece so they can buy right back into their brand family. So I think you're going to see a lot of innovation happening. You saw even with the recent Rolex announcement, with certified pre-owned that they announced some almost I think 3 to 4 months ago. It's so interesting to see one of the largest, if not the largest watch brand that's most famous in the world say that we're going to now start certifying and issuing new warranties on our pre-owned merchandise and have it available in offline retail. This is exactly what the automobile car industry has done for decades. Our industry has not done this, right? So it is exciting to see more and more brands like Rolex play a role in this. It's going to be really interesting to see how jewelry brands start playing a role in this in the future.
Yeah. It's also where the customer journey not only ends with the purchase and the after-purchase service, right? It continues, and then we'll go back to this concept of circular economy.
Right. Especially if you think, right, Jennifer, when we just had the stat we mentioned earlier, 80% of Gen Z consumers are looking to buy pre-owned over new. So that in itself is just going to keep growing and growing and growing because they want to avoid wastage in everything they do. So how do the brands play in the world of that? When that Gen Z consumer starts making money, get into their 20s, get into their late 20s, and they have money, they have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to spend on a luxury item. What are they going to think about? Where are they going to go? How are they going to make their purchase? This is going to be a really interesting time for how brands really react to that.
Yeah, it's also, I think, the reasons for Gen Zs are varied. So where you see, first, they care about sustainability. They care about not producing more waste than necessary. But also, they might want to look for this hard to find item that is stocked somewhere in the world and they can't get a hold of it. Or also, the connotation towards re-commerce became much more positive, I think.
Absolutely.
It's more of something, it's not something, oh, I have to do it because, otherwise, but it's something that, the attitude towards it became much more positive.
Agree, and it's interesting, in the world of re-commerce also, I think this other hype word that's been thrown around over the last 2 years called the word NFT. Actually, I like calling it newly found treasure. Which I learned from a CEO of a great brand. It's going to take off, right? And the brands have to be involved in NFT because it's the ultimate way of traceability. When something's issued in the blockchain, you cannot manipulate it, right? It has a true owner. Every change that gets made and the product gets resold, it has to get reissued in a blockchain, so true traceability gets created. But what's the best thing about NFT is it's a digital record that becomes a loyalty access card. It's a great way of retailers and brands to build loyalty, give consumers that own their product access to experiences, events, and new forms of engagement. And that is going to be really exciting. You're starting to see a couple brands do this. I know IWC in the watch world with Richmond Group recently did one, I think last year, and they dropped it as a loyalty offering, actually, and access to an event during a big trade show in Geneva. So it's going to be really fun to see how brands get active. It's very, very early days, but the applications there are pretty powerful.
Yeah, so in closing, are there any final thoughts on luxury, sustainability that you feel brands and retailers should take away from?
Yeah, I think the big thing about creating the sustainable future where we really, we spoke about like lower the wastage in the market, ensure we're doing right by the environment. That's not one company's job or the brand. It's everybody's job, right? It's every consumer has to be involved. So it's about really how do we build a community around sustainability? How do people come together to collaborate on it and really stay involved in a movement together so it actually becomes stronger for everyone in the future, including the different businesses involved. So that is a key component, right? It's really not going to be about one company. It's going to be about a big, massive community that has to be globally connected. I think that's what we're really excited. And at eBay, look, these are the type of things, given that we are a Silicon Valley-based technology company at the core, we look into new technologies all the time. But at the end of the day, there's just this consumer behavior that's happening. So for us is how do we keep learning about what that consumer wants? How do we create more sustainability through the platform, really get to a world and this objective we have in 2025 on lowering carbon emissions and wastage in the market? And we're really excited about a couple of the big launches that we have coming up this year around that hopefully you guys will all hear about, both in this market, the European market, UK, and even furthering what we have in the US market. We really try to operate as one global company so we can really connect global communities together. And so we're really excited. Look, we have a lot of our team members here from eBay, from these markets, so we're more than happy to connect with each and any one of you and answer questions. So feel free to definitely find one of us.
Yeah, so do you want to give the stage for some Q&A, or
Yeah.
is there any further remarks?
Let's open it up for questions.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Got it.
Is there anybody in the retail, from the retail side, that has already engaged in re-commerce, maybe even with eBay or on some other way, who could share their experience? Was this something that was very new to the audience?
No.
Okay, I think we're good.
Well, it seems,
Well-
I'm assuming that's a yes, that it was very new, right?
So yeah, so then we hope that the information that Tiraf was able to provide us today, that we hope that it was inspiring, that you were able to gain some valuable insights.
So I actually would have a question. I mean, based also on all the research that you've done, how do you see the difference if we take a topic like sustainability across different geographies? Are American consumers looking at sustainability differently than a European audience, than an Asian audience? And how are you going to, or how do you build that into the way you're going to roll out all these different services? Because you do have a global view on these things. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Look, there are different regulations, right, that are happening in the regions that are different. For example, in the UK as well as Europe, there's a potential regulation that will happen very soon around brands will have to be responsible in some sort of way for their end of life of the products they've created. So that will become forcing function. It is a very important thing that the brands are saying. We're not seeing that happen in the US yet, but it's a push that's happening in Europe and UK. And so it's almost a forcing function of being, you made this, you put it in the market. Now you have to be responsible for the wastage that's going to get created. So how are you going to manage that? And so this is a government regulation that we expect that it's different forms of it will pass, and I think it'll just get stronger and stronger over time. So yes, we are starting to see more government involvement in the global markets. They have to be. We're also finding consumer behavior to be slightly different, where consumers in certain markets are thinking more about the wastage they're creating at a greater level than compared to other markets. But that regulation is one of the key components that's relevant to the market we're sitting in currently.
But is wastage the right term? If we're talking, for example, for a gold and diamond ring, nobody's going to throw that away in the bin. So
yeah. So it's not wastage in that form, but what I love about the jewelry industry is that it has a very large opportunity of how do you recycle those products?
Yeah.
How do you recycle? And then another question is, what is the process of recycling? And how do you make sure you're doing that in a very carbon neutral way?
Yeah.
And so all those other questions are coming up. I mean, that's happening in the lab-grown market right now, right? That's one of the big questions in the lab-grown industry is your facility, and some of these lab-grown manufacturers starting to create reports around their sustainability reports or getting certificates, but there's still a long way to go. So yes, jewelry, I wouldn't say it's wastage, but then the key question is, are you responsible for your end of life as a brand? Can you take that product and recycle it and create, and now you're starting to resell sustainable produced products versus metal and materials that would have been brand new, right?
Yeah.
Thought it was very interesting what you mentioned about wastage. Maybe with fine metal products, jewelry that contains gemstones, it's not considered wastage. But for example, in Germany and Europe, all over the world, what happens a lot of the times, a once cherished emotional item that gets handed over generations, and maybe in one of the future generations, it's not as cherished anymore, as much anymore. So what happens a lot, what we saw in the past, is that it was actually treated like waste. It would get to a refinery or to a pawn shop, where maybe then the design wasn't valued anymore, the gemstones would have been thrown out, and you would have just maybe have kept the pure value of the metal.
Yeah.
But through re-commerce and considering the value of the product as a whole, it actually gets a new life. So I think there is actually a change in the idea. So for me as a designer, for example, I love working with also with items that are inherited, and I try to actually fill it with new life and make something new, or try to resell it for the customers if they want a new product, because I feel like it's just a shame to just melt it down.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of jewelry, right? There is very little wastage in it. So it's a great kind of pilot case study for sustainability. The other question, just coming back to consumers, that I would have in different markets is, do you see that certain markets people don't want secondhand jewelry, and other markets where people are like, this is actually vintage is a great way of solving this kind of sustainability challenge? Are there different ways to market it to different consumers? What about educating consumers? What are your experiences or thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there are. If you look at the entire globe, you are seeing certain markets that are still predominantly new. You're starting to see a market like China as an example, right? It is new. It's a cultural thing as well, and there's other driving factors. But you're starting to see some of that younger generation slowly starting to buy more pre-owned, starting to believe in the sustainability message, understanding it. But it's not where it's been matured in the markets we're currently in. And the US market, we are seeing it probably one of the largest and most mature market, and similar in the UK in terms of more pre-owned, larger velocity of pre-owned merchandise being sold in that market. I think in the Europe market, I believe it's starting to grow strong and has a big opportunity as well.
Yeah.
But the Chinese market is the one we're seeing that a lot of that pre-owned merchandise just is not resold in country, and as a result, it actually leaves the country into the markets where it can be potentially resold.
Yeah. think also with what we saw with gemstones and jewelries, I think there's a little bit of a paradigm shift that Gen Z and younger consumers, they actually also cherish this idea of like a vintage piece with also a vintage design idea behind it. Maybe a gemstone that a couple of years ago would have necessarily been recut because the cut would not have been considered modern enough. So now there's also a market for an antique cut or for a vintage piece of jewelry.
Yeah, I agree. It's a way of getting access to something that nobody else has.
Right.
It's something unique. So some people may buy it for the sustainability aspect, and other people may buy it because they just don't want another branded product that basically everybody can buy on.
And we're finding that with another factor called scarcity, right? So goods that are just not easily found in the market. And you're seeing that right now in like the Rolex family of watches. You cannot go to any retail store and get a new Rolex. So you have to go buy that unique rare Rolex in the pre-owned market as an example, right? And you're starting to see that with other brands or brands that potentially make small production, or somebody wants something from like vintage to Tiffany ring from 1950s as an example. Those type of things is another driving factor of having those rare, unique pieces. And a lot of that is starting to come back. Vintage has become a hot trend as well, right? Vintage watches, vintage jewelry.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Oh, well, great.
Hi. You just mentioned about the lab-grown diamonds. That's why I got a question in my mind. As you know, I'm from lab-grown diamonds business. As you know, there is a very huge difference between retail prices and then the reselling prices in lab-grown.
Yes.
It's around 90% difference. That's why I've never really seen great examples of how you can really resell lab-grown diamonds jewelries. Is it really possible? Is there any possible solutions for that? Have you ever seen any like really good examples of that? Any brands, lab-grown diamond brands who are successfully reselling their jewelry, sorry.
No, we have not seen a great example of the brands reselling it. What we are finding, though, because we've launched in the US with our collaboration with GIA, is we are finding lab-grown jewelry coming through the resale market. And it's not branded, it's unbranded goods. And 70% of the jewelry market, 65 to 70%, is still non-branded, right? And especially when you go into lab-grown jewelry, it's pretty much still unbranded. There's a lot of brands. Even Pandora's adopted lab-grown diamonds, as they were spoken about earlier. But what we are finding is that authenticity part is very critical, because too, being in the lab-grown business, is the manufacturing and the production of the lab-grown diamond could be done in different ways. So you also have to make sure, like, how can you assess the quality, not just for cut and clarity, but the quality of the actual production of the stone. Next one is people, when they resell, how they need to make sure that they're not reselling something as natural when it's lab grown. All those things needs to be checked because there's a pricing difference.
Most of the diamonds, they come already.
Counterfeiting?
Most of the diamonds, they come with certificates, right? So whether it's like GIA certificate or IGI. So I don't think it's a problem to like see what the quality of the diamond, and also there are some like laboratory certificates.
Right. It's a good question, but we've actually seen this through our own program. We process maybe thousands of pieces a week currently in jewelry in the US that go through GIA, and we've actually found that certain things that were mislabeled or misdescribed, or the processes of the lab-grown diamonds. We've seen even certificates that are counterfeited, right? So counterfeiting of certificates. That's a whole other conversation to have, is this counterfeiting problem, and how do we stop that? Because that's not really good for the market, and it's against transparency. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't jump in, but that's very interesting because you talked about the GIA earlier, and with them launching the digital reports, that's also a very new move against the problem of counterfeiting reports. So you have a digital report, and this problem.
And there's other labs involved here too, right? You have IGI reports are heavily used, especially for the lab-grown diamonds that are coming out of the Indian market. But so in actuality, in our process, to answer your question, we have found times where the lab-grown diamond is not actually a lab-grown diamond. Or the natural diamond is actually not a natural diamond. It was sold as a natural, but it's actually lab-grown, right? So these are the type of things that GIA, because as you know, they make their own equipment, they check for it, and we're able to maintain that transparent message. But no, it's a great question.
Yeah, but even if we're talking about very reputed brands, like a very well-known brand, and GIA certificates,
Yes.
which is like totally no questions to the quality of the diamonds, still it's not very profitable to resell it, you know what I mean? And that's why I believe many customers, even they want to resell it, but they'll never do that because it just doesn't make sense. They would rather throw it to the trash, as you said.
Yeah.
Because like they're not going to resell it for 5% of the cost.
But it's also still very early on, I think.
Yes.
So there is a lot of consumers that are just considering and starting to buy lab-grown, and there has been a lot of opposition how it takes back from the natural miners. So again, what Giraffe mentioned earlier, it comes back to trust and traceability and transparency to see in the future when consumers have when transparency is existent, when they have the trust, and when it is traceable, then I think in the future there might be new opportunities also for e-commerce. But I think it's very early on.
And to your point also, the market is still small, right? So the amount of lab-grown going in, and brands too, the large majority of the brands have not adopted lab-grown usage yet, right? Especially the well-known ones and the big groups. And so the market is really small. So we're not seeing in lab-grown that the resale market is even like that big yet. Most of the resale market that's big when you talk about jewelry is in the non-lab-grown area, right? So it's mostly the natural gemstone area. But I do see maybe 5, 10 years from now, as hopefully more brands adopt, more of the market share is being captured by lab-grown, which is actually growing. How do brands create value around lab-grown, right? So on the branded lab-grown side, we believe there will be opportunities to maintain resale value and capture more margin. On the unbranded side, I believe there won't be as much. But again.
Thank you very much, guys.
No, thanks.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this conversation, all the questions. The next speaker, which was actually going to be on blockchain, has unfortunately had an issue and will not be able to speak. So we will reconvene at 4 o'clock, which is in 10 minutes, with Pia Tonna from Fully Gemstones right here. So thank you very much, Tira.
Thank you very
Jennifer.
much for having us.
glaube, wir fangen mit dem Film an, dann hat es ein bisschen Sound und dann kommen ja vielleicht auch Leute noch.
Yeah.
Do you want a headset or do you want a microphone? Okay, we'll get you a microphone. Yeah. Let's have a laugh.
Yeah.
Do you want a beer?
How many microphones do we need?
I'll have a shot. I'm flying back to London tonight. Yeah, fly back tonight and then, yeah, no, flying back. Aww. No, with our flights at like, yeah, I just want to wake up in my own bed tomorrow. Just travelling too much.
Yeah.
Same as you. So.
All right.
I will switch it on.
Don't tell me, let me try. Oh, here, don't open it. Let me. I'm not going to remember what that is now, though, am I?
Eve.
Just one more thing. If you're on stage, try to have
Right
the
up to my
mic.
mouth, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ach, ist ja Zoom.
Yes, please,
Yes.
because I'm kind of like. Okay.
Ich habe mein Zoom-Konto.
ja.
Einen Link.
Ah ja, okay.
Aber wo setze ich mich hin und stelle die Fragen? Auf der Bühne. Ja.
Weil
Die müssen nichts anschalten. Nee, die müssen ja nicht im Call dabei sein. Noch mein Computer.
dein Computer muss an dem Sound angehängt sein. Aber das ist alles da.
Okay. Should we? Let's start. Kannst du denen das nochmal sagen, dass nach einem Zoom-Dings kommt?
Ja, jetzt wissen die aber, oder?
Okay, nee, ich hab's dir nicht gesagt.
Okay.
Stress und alright. We'll start by showing the film.
So this thing's going to come up here then, the slides?
The film.
Yeah, film and then the slides.
Did you give them the slides?
I sent them to you.
You sent them to me, I didn't give them to them. So I have to first do that. We'll work on it. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, lovely. So, hello.
Yeah. My name's Chris.
Hi, lovely to meet you.
Lisa said I have to see it.
Oh, so you're
From Munich, but I work by event organizers.
amazing.
We're always open for those kind of
Yeah,
things.
I'd love to. Well,
Yeah.
why don't you sit and listen to this?
Well, I'm here with my wife, and we have our own business here in this area. So this is actually
Ich habe vergessen, dass hier auch noch eine Präsentation kommt. Ja. Nee, ich tue sie jetzt gerade auf den Stick. Den Film habt ihr ja, oder? slides, yeah. So I apologize for some of the things.
No, no, gosh, it's fine.
But we're good, we're good. They're going to switch it on. So our next speaker is Pia Tonna. She has 30 years of experience in luxury and jewelry. Oh my God.
Wow.
Wow. She worked in marketing and PR for Chanel, Paul Smith and Gemfields. And lastly, she joined the company Fully Gemstones and is their chief marketing officer and executive director. And we're going to have this talk be more of a conversation. We'll actually begin by a film that was made 2-3 years ago about Fully Gemstones, about the story of peridot, about the history of peridot. If you're not familiar about peridot, this will be a really good introduction, I would say even an immersion into the world of peridot. And after that, we'll have a conversation and also some pictures and slides on this. So thank you for joining us, Pia, and we're going to start off with the video, please.
Out of the infinite depths of our planet's genesis, a gemstone was born. Peridot is formed deep within the mantle of the Earth, just like a diamond, made of iron, magnesium, silicon, and oxygen. The intensity of green depends on the amount of iron present in the chemical structure. Peridots are brought to light by the colossal forces of earthquakes and volcanoes. Beyond their incomparable richness and beauty, Chinese peridots encapsulate a story millions of years in the making, naturally calming, vibrant, and distinctive, the story of green peridot. History reveals numerous tributes to thousands of years of glamorous peridot designs. It was first discovered by ancient Egyptians who called it the gem of the sun because of its exhilarating color. The most fascinating peridots belong to the European royal house of Habsburg, which put peridot in the spotlight, and the 20th century saw some of the most glittering peridot creations, which were passed on from generation to generation as a gift of light and hope. The mesmerizing birthstone of August, peridot was once among the most prized gems in the world. One of the incredible aspects of peridot is the mythical powers that it has been imbued with over the millennia. Ancient Egyptian priests believed that it embodied the forces of nature and used it to communicate with their gods. Admired for centuries for its beauty and magical powers, peridot became a symbol of courage and hope. Having discovered the world's largest peridot deposit in China, the land of marvels, we began our journey with a dedication to protect our environment and to empower our customers with knowledge. It's important to know where your peridot comes from. Our peridots are high-quality natural gemstones with no need for treatments. We will offer full traceability on all our products. Clients are safe in the knowledge that they can buy our peridot with complete confidence. Behind the rough surface of peridot, there's a world of breathtaking beauty. Peridot is one of the few gems that can only be found in one color. The glorious grass green color is revealed through precise cuts. We always look for perfection, which is an impossible target, yet we are determined to keep chasing it, because with every new discovery, every new shape and facet, we keep finding new ways to reveal the rich and beautiful light of peridot. A resolute style demands an empowering companion. Elegant and audacious, bold and daring, we celebrate peridot creations around the globe for their avant-garde brilliance and magnificent allure. Their bold shapes and modern materials coveted for their exclusivity, wrapped around the gem of the sun in a daring mastery of design.
Great. Well, Well, this says a lot. I think we're gonna maybe we can put up the presentation, the first slide of the presentation, and have that in the background.
We make it full screen.
And make it full screen, yes. Well, I'm sure
If
we can
possible,
work on that.
yeah.
So my first question to you, Pia, given that we've now gotten our first impressions of what peridot is, what about you? How did you get into gemstones and jewelry, this whole kind of strange world? And you've worked with so many different types of gemstones,
Well,
and yet you still find the fascination to work on a new one.
Yeah.
How did all that begin?
Well, maybe, well, first of all, I just want to explain where this is the Chiangbai Mountains, this amazing picture that you can see behind you, this amazing green. So I went to this area in 2019, and that's where the peridot deposit is that we're going to talk about later. But let me show you where it all started. If you can go to the first slide. So here we go. So this, I don't know to everybody else, but I actually fell in love with this. I found this when I was 7 years old, and I've never known what it was. And in fact, recently, when I was in Tucson the other week, I showed it to specimen dealer, and I said, "What the hell is this? I've carried it around with me for nearly 40-odd years. It weighs a ton, but I just loved it. I found it on the South Coast, and yeah, there it is in my bedroom on my windowsill. Anyway, but apparently it's a marcassite concretion pseudomorphed to a geotite from Sussex. And I was just gobsmacked that this specialist geologist could tell me everything and even could tell me where it came from. So that kind of started my passion with minerals, and obviously places like the Natural History Museum in London. I don't know if you've ever been there to the Earth galleries. It's just incredible, and you're looking at all this amazing material that's been created by Mother Nature. So that's when it started.
And so how do you go from your passion to getting other people passionate about colored gemstones? You've worked with gem fields in the past.
Yeah.
So much has happened over the last 2 decades in terms of marketing colored gemstones. Before, people knew, you know, it was all about diamonds, and now ruby, sapphire, emerald are more and more popular. Now there's other gems, peridot, spinel, tourmalines, garnets. How do you see that evolving? How has it evolved, and where are we going with all this?
I think what's really, really key is education. When I joined, you mentioned Gemfields. I have to admit something here. When I joined Gemfields, I knew nothing about colored gemstones. All I knew that a ruby was red, a sapphire was blue, and an emerald was green, and that was about it. And then you start reading, and then you start learning, and then you go and visit these locations. And it's the people, the places, the mining situation. You start getting this like intoxicity. You just get like drawn in. And when you're then visiting and you're seeing how these minerals have formed, these gemstones have formed, it's just a passion. It becomes a passion. And I've been lucky enough to stand in the Kargem Emerald Mine, looking up these big formations and coming down to finding these emeralds in amongst this slushy mush. And you know, you just get drawn into it. So that, and then with the ruby mines, and then obviously peridot. So every time you come across another gemstone, you're fascinated by it. You want to know how did it come about? How did it, you know, what was the elements inside that mineral that made it that mineral, made it that gemstone? So it's...
So you see a bright future for colored gemstones if we talk about marketing and kind of the market for jewelry and gemstones and the use and integration of colored gemstones.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the diamond industry, again, when I joined Gemfields in 2012, diamonds were everywhere. They were in all the shop windows, in all the advertising. There was hardly any colored gemstones around on the marketplace. Colored gemstones had been seen as a granny's jewel. It wasn't interesting. It had been put in boring jewelry. But then the more education, the more sort of awareness you build on the different gemstones, the more opportunity you give designers, and the more creativity starts to come. And I'm really, really happy to say, even at today's show, I've had a really amazing walk around the gem halls here, and I've seen so many incredible gemstones.
Yeah.
Like, incredible gemstones. And they're all there. Some of them are way rarer than the other gemstones that are out there. They just haven't had their opportunity to shine yet.
So how rare is peridot? Or can you tell us a little bit more about this mining project? And I think you've told me a lot that you want to work mine to market, full traceability. Can you share, I think there's also some pictures, a little bit more about the mine and what your vision is for it?
Yeah, so the mine, as you can see, is situated up in the northeast province of China in an area called Jilin. It's the largest known peridot deposit in the world, and at full capacity, it has the opportunity to produce around 60 million carats, which sounds scary because it's a lot of carats of gemstones, but we're actually not going to suddenly bring loads of peridot to the market. And what's really, really significant about this project is that we want to create a blockchain. So we're working with key people in the industry to help us build our ESG, help us build our ERP, so that we know every single material, when it's mined, when it's been moved, etc., from the market through our system with our cutting and to the end, to the brands and designers.
Great. Okay. Well, I think there might be...
Yeah. So
this is a little bit on your kind of vision for the project.
Yeah. So so this kind of explains the size and scale of the mine. A little bit more about the mine. The mine was discovered in the 60s and was left dormant. And the company Fuli that I work for, we started our whole journey back in 2016, 2017, getting the right mining licenses, understanding the lay of the land. Then a little thing called COVID impacted us. And we had to do everything by Zoom, but we soldiered on, we reached out, we started spreading the word about peridot, reinvigorating peridot as a whole, working with interesting speakers, lecturers, the labs, trying to get people to understand what it's about. So our plan is to mine, sort, grade, cut and polish, and then work with a myriad of designers.
Yeah, okay.
So.
And you have worked with a lot of designers already.
This is actually
I think this is quite interesting
really
so that people understand that a mine doesn't just produce million-dollar stones, but that there's a lot of complexity to running a mine and actually running it profitably.
Yeah, exactly. So, so what you're seeing here is a typical mine. No, not a typical. Every mine has its own production, and different grades, different qualities, different sizes come from a mine, and all depending on your geological location will depend, and your actual deposit you're working with will depend on what's coming out. So we analysed our rough through our geological survey, and around from the top pyramid is about 10% of mine production. So those are gemstones in the rough. You're talking about 15 carat plus in the rough. The largest specimen we found is 301 carats. But we're not going to cut that one. We're going to hopefully put it into a museum because it's really special. And then you work your way through. But what it allows us to do is work across all areas of the jewelry industry. So from high jewelry right through to young commercial collections as well.
Okay.
Should I also talk about the other things? So one thing that's, so collaboration. Sorry, let's jump.
No,
so
I actually had a quick other question before we talk about collaboration. Ethics and sustainability. Huge topic, has been so for a few years. Different people kind of interpret it differently. There's government regulation, there's demand from consumers. What are your views on this? Is there like a very strong consumer demand for this? Is it something where the industry is doing the right thing? How do you see that market kind of maturing?
I think it's really come to the forefront finally, and I'm really happy to see that it has. All countries are different, governance is different, but if we as human beings want our planet to be around, then we've got to do the right thing, whether or not that is the way way people work, the way we mine, the way we set up the operations that we're doing. And like I said, country by country, it's very, very different. You get large-scale mining, you get small-scale mining. They all can work together. We've all got to work together as a set of people. It's changed a lot. I think even in country to country, even in like where the mine is.
Well, let's take China, for example. Yeah. What does sustainability mean to the Chinese consumer? I'd really be curious about that.
It is really, I was very curious because obviously I joined there 4 years ago, and we all have this like idea of what countries are like and whether or not they think they care about the planet. And there are many things going on inside China that are good things. So the Siberian tiger has returned to the Chiangmai Mountains, and none of us know that. There's at least 20 mating couples back of Siberian tigers in the Chiangmai Mountains, which is a protected species now inside there by the government. So where the mine is, it's situated in a forest of around 101 rare species of trees, all protected. So even our mining licenses, as many as we have to live by the rules of what the government is telling us to do.
Okay.
And the actual mine itself wouldn't even be allowed to start without the vote of the local people. So a vote went round to all of the villagers, and they said, okay, there's this company that wants to come and mine. If you vote no, it doesn't happen. If you vote yes, it's up to you if you want it to happen. And they voted yes because they want the job creation, they want a new industry to come there, but they know the land is also going to be protected.
Okay. And it seems that, coming to my next question, it seems that designers are also saying yes or have voted yes.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about how these design collaborations come about? Is it designers who reach out to you or vice versa? Or how do these kinds of projects?
Well, we've kind of made a bit of a noise in the industry about our peridot. We've had to first of all, put this amazing gemstone back on the map because it had been forgotten about. And when you start digging and scratching beneath the surface a bit more, you realize peridot's actually got this over thousands of years of history that we've all forgotten about. So we've had some really great people give lectures on peridot. We've really delved into the history. And by spreading, again, the education, working with labs, it's helped to reinvigorate and put it back on the map. And from that, and from a lot of the things we've been doing, working with journalists, working with key people in the industry, a lot of these young designers have come to us, but equally we want to support things like the Goldsmith Craft and Design Council Awards, which are happening next week. We joined last year. We set out a peridot 2D category, and this is what's really interesting here. So it was a 2D category. It wasn't for finished product. And I'm like, oh my God, these designs are so amazing. How could we not bring these to fruition? And this is where collaboration is really, really important. So the Goldsmith Company and an independent Viper Designs, we all rallied together. We sourced the stones. We cut the peridots for the designer, the winning designer, helped source the other gemstones. And then we all came together, and we're now getting these pieces made, and they're getting unveiled next week. So to me, that's key in our industry as well, bringing together manufacturers, designers, gemstone companies, education. That's what's going to make our industry stronger and make gemstones stronger.
And also making younger designers who may not be so well known or who may not have big marketing budgets, giving them a platform where they can
precisely that
kind of showcase their work.
Yeah, so we, in some cases, we will underwrite the gemstones and we'll help them bring those products and designs to market. We'll help promote them not only here in the West, but we also promote them in China on the Chinese channels for them too. Gives them a voice inside China. Many designers want to break into China. They're also Chinese consumers are hungry for Western design talent too. So it's this two-way street, which is really amazing. And then once the jeweler then has sold their piece, then they can pay back for the gemstones if we feel that's the right thing for them to do. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg, because if they don't get the help, then they won't have the design. They can't move their business forward. So
okay. And the other thing I was curious about is that you've talked a lot about sustainability, and we talk a lot about sustainability, but can you share some really concrete, actionable projects of what that means at a mine site or in the supply chain?
Yeah. So there we go. So we're in a really fortunate position with this mine that if you go back to the pyramid of production quickly, I'd like to show you. So you can see here, look, we've put here no waste in brackets, and that's because that's what we're aiming for. Above is the peridot, and below is the byproduct of the mine. So if you flick forward to the inside of the mine here. So let me explain something. So the black is called basalt and can be used in industry. It can be melted and made into a basalt fiber. Basalt fiber is used for the car industry, especially new electric cars. And then you have olivine sand, which is the yellowy stuff that sits around the big gemmy material. Sorry about not being very geologically using the right terms, but this is my term, and I like to talk in a way that hopefully everybody can get it. So every single material that you're seeing here in the mine wall is actually repurposed. So we use peridot, we use olivine sand, and you can use basalt. And now let me explain something I discovered recently about the olivine. Can we flick to the next thing? Next slide. Ooh. There we go. So here's a little explanation about these two wonder materials that sit alongside the peridot. So volcanic basalt, which is exactly what this deposit is, clearly states here, it improves root systems, it helps crops get stronger, it basically will benefit the farmers around our mine. It can be used for roads and railway networks, it can be used as building construction material, and like I said, it can be used for the car industry. Now let's talk about this beauty called olivine sand. This is a little amazing weapon which will hopefully help go towards helping protect our environment. So olivine sand, 1 ton of olivine sand can take up to 1 ton of CO2, which is pretty amazing stuff. All you need to do is crush it and scatter it around, let the rain fall it, and it does its job. It's a really, it's in abundance. Olivine sand is a really amazing material that's quite in abundance around the world. It can be used as an abrasive, it can be used in building materials. So we are looking at other areas in the environmental arena that we can work with other companies that can help us also use this material to put it for a good purpose. As far as the mine is concerned, we will be scattering and crushing this material around the mine. The mine is not an open cast mine, it's a room and pillar mine. So we're going in the side of the Changbai Mountains, but every single thing we bring out, we repurpose. And it can also be used as building material as well. So when we start to build our sort house and our grading and our cutting place next to the mine, we will build it with these materials included in the structure of the building. And on top of that, we will use solar power and other machinery that actually can stop the impact of our mining operation on the land. So it's pretty amazing. We'll be working with Everledger to help with our ESG, and we're working with another company, which I can't mention them yet, but they're also helping our ERP. So we'll be measuring everything, recording everything. So our aim is zero waste, zero carbon.
Yeah, and it's a conversation we've had many times. One of the tricky bits of sustainability is the challenge is actually measuring your impact, and so also measuring your progress. So that's one of the things that you can do by creating science-based metrics so that you can see the evolution of what you're doing.
Yeah, and like I said, we are discovering things all the time. All the time we're discovering new things. And if we, working with the likes of Everledger and other people, again, collaboration and coming together in the industry, things that we learn and we go, we're going to make mistakes. I know we will, but we can only keep learning and we can only keep trying to do the right thing. Yeah. And I think if we can take that as a model and it can be replicated in other areas, then we're on a win-win, I think. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience, maybe about peridot or this business model? Yeah, Rachel? Yeah. Or shout and I can repeat the question otherwise, or it's coming.
Hi. Well, thanks. Pia, obviously you've been doing a lot of groundwork to kind of build the reputation of peridot, whether that's through the designer collaborations or setting out kind of these targets for what you're going to do with the byproducts. Do you know when you're going to kind of ramp up the mining? When will we kind of see more of the product come onto the market?
So we hope that we start our full mining operation 3rd quarter this year. We were hampered by the likes of being shut down every other minute. So we are hoping by this 3rd quarter that we will bringing it to market. So there's lots of things going on in the background that I can't talk about right now, but you'll be seeing it happening from the 3rd quarter and lots of new collaborations happening as well. And I can't wait because I'm chomping at the bit.
So rich past and bright future for peridot.
Exactly. Thank you.
Great. We look forward to it. Thank you so much, Pia.
You're welcome.
And if any of you have any questions about the product or peridot, I'm sure Pia will be around for a little while. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is actually a presentation which is taking place over Zoom because one of the speakers is in Sierra Leone, so we're just going to connect the whole technical side of things, and we'll be having a panel conversation about the social impact of diamonds. So if you can have 5 minutes of patience, we're going to set all this up. Thank you. Can you hear me, Hans and Esther? You can hear what I'm saying? Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. All right. So it works. So I'm going to introduce our two speakers who are actually quite far away. Our first speaker is Dr. Hans Merket, who is a researcher based in Belgium. He's a researcher on natural resources and human rights. I thought we might have you over Zoom calling in from Tanzania, Hans, but it looks like you're more in Belgium right now. You work for IPIS in Belgium, and you're also part of the Kimberley Process Civil Society Coalition. So you have a lot of experience on diamonds and natural resources, and I'm very glad that you could join us today. Our second speaker is Esther Finda Kande. She is based in Sierra Leone. So thank you, Esther, for joining us. You're a human rights activist in natural resources in Sierra Leone, and you're the founder and director of the organization Women in Mining and Extractives, which works with mining communities in Sierra Leone. So here the aim was to have two different perspectives also on what social impact means for diamonds. So thank you both so much for joining us. Thank you also to the audience, who unfortunately you can't see right now, for being so patient about trying to work this out technologically, but it was the only way we could make this work. And I had a few questions for you, and there may also be questions from the audience afterwards. So the kind of title for this talk was Building a More Responsible Diamond Supply Chain, Challenges and Opportunities. My first question would actually be for Hans. Given your experience with the diamond industry, what do you see as being the biggest social and environmental issues associated with the diamond supply chain? And why is it important to address these? Why is it important for jewelers to address these? What is the reaction of consumers? What can you share on that? So, go ahead, Hans.
All right. I hope you hear me well. Thanks for having me. I'm indeed just back from Tanzania, but not in time to make it to be there with you, unfortunately. So yeah, I can touch upon a few issues. It's of course a very broad and complex issue, but maybe to start with artisanal mining, we've been doing in the past 2 years a coordinated research with our partners of the Kimberley Process Civil Society Coalition. So that's about 15 African NGOs, where we did coordinated studies on the impact on a grassroots level of diamond mining. And a few issues that emerged when we look at artisanal mining in, I think, the 6 countries where we did this research, that were remarkable because they came back in every country, are, first of all, I think the informality, of course, of the sector, which makes it, the artisanal diamond mining sector, difficult to regulate on the one hand, but also makes the people active in this sector very prone to abuse by either undisciplined government officials or traders, financiers, smuggling networks, and so on. And then secondly, I think what is well known, of course, are the working conditions in this sector. There's considerable health and safety risks. There's issues of child labor and so on. I think Esther will talk a bit more about women's rights issues, which are very important there as well. And then maybe finally, a big challenge today still is the environmental impact of the sector, with mainly deforestation, landscape destruction, also water pollution. And then as to why I think it's important to address these issues, is when we look at the artisanal diamond mining sector, we need to address this because of its enormous potential for socioeconomic advancement. So hundreds of thousands of people are active directly or indirectly in this sector. Many more livelihoods depend on it. And I think it's important that the revenues generated by these people tends to stay more in these areas. They're used nationally rather than being shipped out to other places in the globe. But for that to happen, this sector needs to be well managed and supported. And I think that is where it often goes wrong. We've seen actually it's a sector that for a very long time has been criminalized, was seen as something that needed to be rooted out. This has changed. It's still in a few countries like that, countries like Angola, Zimbabwe. But it has changed somewhat towards a sector. It was seen as a sector that needed to be brought in line, that needed to be adapted to regulations that apply to industrial mining. That is the situation in most countries globally today, I think. But then a positive sign that we start seeing in several places is that this potential, this sector starts to be appreciated more, and there are some initiatives that look more at supporting and assisting this sector to become, to deliver the full potential it has. And there's some examples in Tanzania, for instance, about that.
Thank you. Yes, because we often hear about all the things that are wrong and bad, and I think a lot of people in the industry kind of feel like, oh, there's nothing that we can change. There's so many issues. But the point you highlight about the potential, that there is this huge development potential as well, because diamonds are a high value resource. And if they are managed well, more of that resource can trickle down to communities. So I think that's an important point to highlight. My question would now be to Esther. Esther, you're on the ground in Sierra Leone. What is your perspective on the impact of diamonds, both socially and environmentally? What does it mean for communities? And there's a lot of issues in Sierra Leone, but are there also ways of kind of changing the narrative for companies to work with some of these issues to improve them? What are your thoughts on this, Esther? And your microphone is off, I think. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. Like you said, I'm on the ground and a lot is going on. In Sierra Leone, when I say we in the civil society, be able to push very hard to ensure that there are laws to give back to the community, which is being implemented. The CDA, the DSCDF, these are all means of giving back to the community, which, from the diamond mining sector, which is a very good venture. And that one has, brought a lot of development at the community level, though it's not enough. And looking at the development aspect of it, a lot needs to be done. Because most of these communities, they've lost their land to mining activities. They've lost so many things, and the mining itself is a different, type of mining. We are talking of companies, and companies also, there are different ways that they mine. Some actually have to move the communities from their original places to another place, which they have a different issue altogether. And some, they are still there and they're working, but at the same time, they are also having different challenges. We have a lot of video documentary. We actually did here on different aspects that are affecting the community. But what I will say, the human development is very key in the mining communities, because there are monies that are going back, that undertaking developmental activities, building schools, doing roads and so on. But the human development is what is key here, which I really want to emphasize on. If a mining company is operating in a particular enclave, we really want to, as moving forward, let them pay attention to those that are really, really affected and deeply hurt because of their activities. Though they are giving back to the government, but who knows how much is really going back to those people. So if, for instance, a particular community, a mining company is operating, we are really hoping that they should support these communities. They should help them organize themselves, the community organize themselves, and the mining community support them financially in terms of training, building human capacity. That is what I am really emphasizing on. Because if we can have all the schools, we can have all the buildings and so on, but if the human capacity is not built, then at the end of the day, it will not be beneficial to the communities. And we have a lot of young people that are coming up that their parents are not up to it. Some of them, they have lost their land where they can get resources to support them, and they don't have that resources now. What will happen? They will drop out of school. They don't have skills, and at the end of the day, there will be chaos. Even the mining companies, they will not be happy, because when those people, that they think they have been marginalized, they can cause mayhem in the communities. So I really want to emphasize on the human development, aspect of, if the mining company want to help these are things we are expecting them to do. Because like I said, the laws, in Sierra Leone has make it clear what you should give back to the community in terms of, like this DSCDF, the CDA is going back to the community, and these monies are going, out of local authorities who decide on what to happen. But when you talk about the poor among the poor, who talk for them, who cares for them, who help them to develop their kids, and they are all Sierra Leoneans, and they are affected by the mining activities.
Thank you, Esther. I think it's a really important point that you bring up. We talk a lot about sustainability, about responsibility, about traceability, about ethics, about due diligence, but we tend to forget that there are humans behind that. So my next question would be to Hans, given your more global perspective, how do we develop human capacity? Have you seen case studies of where it works? I feel like often a challenge is that there's such a disconnect from trade shows like here where diamonds are sold, but we don't really know where they're from. And then we have mining communities, but there's no direct link between the two. And the fact that that direct link it exists, but it's rather vague, makes also that connection difficult. What is your kind of more global insight on that? Because obviously action is needed.
Yeah, indeed. I think there's various examples to look at. Maybe to start on, there's been a few of these pilot projects that have looked at how to promote responsible mining in the artisanal diamond sector and how to link these diamonds to the global market. So there's the Gem Fair project of De Beers in Sierra Leone. There's Origema by the Antwerp World Diamond Center in Congo. So these have been pilot projects that worked with a number of mine sites and tried to make that connection and have, well, the one in DRC is in full development. Gem Fair has been active more long. That have booked great progress. I think that the challenge or the next step is now how we can scale these pilots or at least learn from them so that not only a relatively small group of miners benefits from them, but that it can also be to the benefit of the sector more widely. So I think that is where we should now be focusing on. And then also, but to link to what Esther also was saying before, I think, indeed, many companies are doing a lot of good things through corporate social responsibility, investing in schools, investing in hospitals. But we have seen also in our research in different countries that it's often still a missed opportunity to go that extra step and to meaningfully engage with communities in order to make sure that it's not just this one-sided charity, but also support that really responds to specific needs and priorities on the one hand, and that can also help to close the often big gap between these communities and these mines. Often these remain very isolated entities with big walls around them, staff that is flown in and out. And that is where there's no human interaction, a lot of mistrust emerges and frustration that leads to tensions, and that is often the cause of then repression and human rights abuse. And if, for instance, this corporate social responsibility could, if you invest in education, it could invest in education that then provides employment opportunities for local people in these mines. If you invest in promoting agriculture, it could be a basis for the mine to start procuring locally and so on. So I think these efforts really need to focus on how we can have really more human interaction and close that often big gap still. Because, between these very modern operation and then these often very poor rural communities living around them.
Okay, back over. So back over to Esther. There's, a topic of women's empowerment and gender inequality. It's an issue that you've been working a lot on with your organization. I've been a few times to Sierra Leone and seen that the diamond sector is very male-rich. There's a lot of men in it. In gold mining, there's a lot more women. But specifically for diamonds, how do you see that with diamonds we could reduce gender inequality and kind of promote more women's empowerment? What is your perspective from the field on that? What is needed?
Yeah, this is the most interesting question because gender empowerment, especially women, is very, very important in this sector. And this is what we've been working on for a very long time, and we're still working on it. It's very disappointing, to see that, for instance, in the mining companies, you see the gap between the men and women that have been employed is so wide. When you read the Sierra Leone EITI report, it tells you less than 10% of the employees are women. And sometimes even this employee is not explained which position they are holding, whether they are just cook or security. So this is where we are going. That's why we emphasize on the human development aspect. If women are not up to it, then let them be trained so that they can, occupy higher positions so that they can get enough resources to take care of their family. So the aspect of gender empowerment is very key in the mining sector. In the artisanal mining sector, we have a lot of women that are in artisanal mining, a lot of women, but also at which level, what are they doing there is another question. Most of them are engaged in either, assisting, cooking, and so on. Now, for instance, in the diamond mining, they have a local name for it, call it go show your bone, something, go show your bone. And these are areas that women find themselves. Per day, they work per day, they give them peanuts, very small amounts of money, and which cannot take care of themselves and their family. So the gap is so wide. So we need women to be trained. We need women to be supported. 2 years down the line now, we have been organizing women who are artisanal miners so that they can form themselves into cooperative. But the issue is who support them. They don't have support for now. So because they don't have support, it's very difficult. They are interested, they want to be in that sector, they want to be in that space, but they find it difficult because there's no trust for women. They tell you that women are weak, women are, they can't do it. And there was one meeting that a supporter said, I will not support a woman because I know the woman cannot do it. So these are a lot of issues we are, working around, changing the mentality of the people that women can do it because women want to do it. And because they want to do it, they need to be given the support, both by, mining company can support them. You can, organize or have women that are organized, support them so that they can also be in that space and take care of their families, because most of them are breadwinners. So both in the artisanal mining and the large-scale mining, even the small-scale mining, there are women. But what they receive is the problem. What they are receiving is not, compare to their male counterpart just because they are women. So we want that gap to be closed and want them to be really capacitated so that they too can be proud to be a Sierra Leone and be a miner.
Thank you. Hans, I'm just wondering, for people kind of watching our conversation who might be jewelers or even consumers who are a little bit baffled and who are thinking, wow, this is so overwhelming. I want to do something good. I want to contribute to a better social impact. How do people kind of contribute to a Kimberley Process Civil Society Coalition, to NGOs, ask questions of their suppliers? Do you have any kind of recommendations or ideas on if people want to continue buying natural diamonds and they really want to take these issues into consideration? How should they approach this?
Yeah,
it's a tough question. Sorry, but
no, it's a tough one because as jewelers and consumers, you are of course at the end of a very long and complex supply chain, and your impact and leverage over all the actors that operate along that supply chain may be limited. I think there's still a few things that can be done. In the first place, indeed, a lot of these issues can only be addressed or get only some attention because civil society organizations or community-based organizations or cooperatives in African countries or other producer countries work on them. So I think just making sure there is support for those organizations to both, I think, everything from documentation to follow-up to remediation, that they can do these things. And as you said, I think also the basic thing of asking questions remains very important and still too often missing. Not just asking where your diamonds come from. Of course, often you will get a quite unsatisfactory reply, but asking what is done to make, which steps are you taking to progress or to make sure there is things evolve in the right direction. And by continuing to ask these questions, you of course help to raise pressure on your suppliers and their suppliers and so on to come up with answers. And then another thing I think is also about informing your customers and clients correctly and honestly. Be transparent about what you can and cannot assure and which steps you take to deal with the probably many unknowns there still are. There was last week another investigation by a Canadian news outlet that with hidden cameras showed that jewelers in Canada, for instance, are still relying on Kimberley process certification, for instance, to say that there's no environmental or labor issues associated with the diamonds they are selling, while that has nothing to do with the Kimberley process that deals with a very narrow element of conflict diamonds. And these words, they are just words, but they're not harmless because they take away the incentive to keep pushing for improvements along the supply chain.
And Esther, I'm going to kind of continue the question and ask you, what do you see as the future of diamond mining in Sierra Leone? And given all the work that you're doing with your, with your NGO, how can people support it if they want to support this kind of work on increasing the social impact in the diamond industry? Just wait 1 minute. We'll wait for this announcement to be over.
Not leave your bags or luggage unattended. Report suspicious objects to the security guards or to the information counter nearby.
Okay. Go ahead, Esther. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the future of mining in Sierra Leone, I'm telling you, Sierra Leone started mining since 1930, and I am really sure that we still have a lot to do when it comes to mining because we have a lot of mining companies coming in, especially for the Kimberley mining. So it means there are a lot of resources in Sierra Leone. So because of that, a lot needs to be done so that, people realize more, though a lot is coming, but we want to see more benefit for the people, more benefit for the community. So the future, what we want to see more support to the local, miners, especially the women, the artisanal miners, the women. Want to see more support to them, more training, and even the jewelry. There's so many things they can do. I remember I have a discussion with somebody some time back, and it said that there are other stones that they use to make jewelry, but we don't have ideas in Sierra Leone. So everybody is looking forward to, what is happening in the large money scale. We are not getting much, but there are other opportunities that can be explored if only that, support. And I'm sure there's willingness. We have a lot of women as well that will be ready, to get training on so many other things that they can benefit themselves. But mining, we have a long way to go, because we still have artisanal miners everywhere, small-scale mining. In fact, it has blown up. We have a lot of mining, small-scale mining that is going on in Sierra Leone. So the future is bright. So much is going on. So all we need now is innovation, innovative ideas to train the locals, to train the community women so that they can, develop themselves. They can use those skills to actually put food on their table. Otherwise, every day they will be looking at the mining companies, and they will not be happy, and there will be chaos here and there, which we really don't want. So there's a lot of good feature for Sierra Leone, especially with the geodata, survey data, now the result is out, and we are seeing, mining companies coming in every now and then, and I guess there's so much in Sierra Leone that can be explored. So Sierra Leone is ready. We just need people who can support. We just need ideas that can really train the people and give them more ideas so that they can use those ideas to develop the country, they develop themselves, and also add value to the minerals, the resources that is coming out of Sierra Leone. Because all the time going raw. Sometimes we say, where is the diamond going? And we are here, we are poor, and so on and so forth. We want more for our country because Sierra Leone is rich. Honestly, we just need a real support to the people. Like I say, human development is what is needed now so that we can take the mining to another level.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why diamonds couldn't be cut. There's no reason why diamonds couldn't be cut in Sierra Leone or jewelry could be manufactured in Sierra Leone. And this comes back to human capacity and human development as well. Thank you so much for that. Is there maybe a question from the audience? Anybody have a question on diamonds and social impact? Well, there doesn't seem to be a question. I think we got through most of the issues. If I'm just going to briefly summarize, I'm really happy we had this conversation. You know, human development, human capacity, there's a lot of potential. And as you said, Hans, it's all about informing, about being transparent, about being honest also when you don't have answers, and asking questions, and reaching out to people, partnerships, including the collaboration that you both have, and that is happening within the Civil Society Coalition, and getting that information out so that change can happen. So thank you so much today for joining us. I hope we get to meet soon in person rather than on Zoom, but I'm still very happy that you could share your insights on this. And I'll also make sure that people have links to both of your organizations if they want to learn more about your work. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And it has been a long while.
Bye-bye, Esther.
And how are you?
This is what it looks like. Thank you so much. All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and the seminar program is over for today and will continue tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and all the other talks will be in person. This was rather exceptional that we do this one over Zoom, so thank you for attending.